We are almost there. Okay, we are live on Facebook and I have pressed record. It's your meeting, Madam Chair.
All right. Good evening. I now call the November 10th, 2020 remote meeting of the Charlotte-Mecklenburg Board of Education to order. All board members are participating by simultaneous communication. And Madam Clerk, will you please call the roll?
Board members, as I call your name, please say present. Board Member Rhonda Cheek,
Present.
Board Member Dr. Ruby Jones, Board Member Carol Sawyer,
Present.
Board Member Margaret Marshall,
Present.
Board Member Sean Strain,
Present.
Board Member Lenora Shipp,
Present.
Board Member Jennifer De La Hara,
Present.
Board Vice Chair Thelma Byers Bailey,
Present.
Board Chair Elise Dashew.
Present.
Madam Chair, we have a quorum with 8 members present.
All right. I will now entertain a motion to adopt the agenda.
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion from Ms. Byers Bailey, a second from Ms. Sawyer. All those in favor of the motion, please raise your hands and say yes. Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Okay, that passes unanimously. Madam Clerk. Okay, and now I'm going to call on District 4 Board Member Carol Sawyer to introduce tonight's pledge leader.
I'm very pleased to introduce Blake Williams. Blake is a 9-year-old third grader at Mary Oaks International Academy. He has attended Mary Oaks for the past 4 years since kindergarten, and he loves his school, teachers, and friends very much. His favorite subject is science, and his hobbies include building Legos and playing with his family dogs. He has 2 dogs. Blake is an outgoing, enthusiastic, and hardworking student who always ensures he accomplishes both his personal and academic goals each day. So Blake, I'll hand it over to you to lead us in the pledge.
I pledge of allegiance
To
to
the flag
of
The
United
United States of America,
America and to the republic that which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, in liberty and justice for all.
Blake, you can go ahead and share your words that you have for us tonight.
Responsibility to me means that you take care of your materials. This includes your Chromebook and making sure it is charged for class. I am also responsible with my Chromebook by handling it carefully and by carrying it with 2 hands. My materials are always near me and ready to go for school. Responsibility also means doing your work and keeping up with it every day. You should follow the schedule to make sure you stay on track. I go to my meetings and complete work without my mom or teacher having to tell me or reminding me. Outside of school, I'm responsible by helping my mom with keeping the house clean. It is important to be responsible because it will help you be successful.
Thank you, Blake. Appreciate that. That was wonderful.
Oh, thank you, Blake. All righty. Colleagues, we have one public hearing tonight on the proposed changes to policy JKD, and the rules are as follows. Each speaker will be called in to speak one at a time. Each speaker will have a maximum of 3 minutes to address the board, and groups will have 10 minutes. Each speaker may only talk about the topic that is the subject of the public hearing. Individual student matters or specific personnel matters may not be discussed. Personal attacks will not be allowed. Profanity or other inappropriate language will not be allowed, and the board reserves the right to cut off and mute any speaker who violates these rules. And we have one speaker for the public hearing tonight, that is Arthur Griffin. If we could now bring him onto the screen and hear what Mr. Griffin has to share with us tonight.
Hello, hello, hello.
Hi, we hear you. We don't see you, but you can either turn on your camera or you can just speak and we can hear you fine.
Okay.
There you
All
are.
right. All right. I'm at a football practice. So, okay, I'll make this very quick. First of all, thank you, Madam Chair, members of the school board, and Superintendent Winston for giving me a chance to respond to this particular item. As you all may know, the right to attend school is a constitutional right. And when a decision is made with a possibility where that student may not have a chance to attend school, like an out-of-school suspension, whether short-term or long-term, a fact-finding due process hearing is required by law. I submitted something to your staff some time ago about a case called Givens versus Poe, which is a Fourth Circuit Court of Appeals decision that speaks specifically to a student having the right to a due process hearing. This afternoon, I received some information from the chair, but I want to explain just a little bit about what due process means. The 14th Amendment has two elements to due process. One part is procedural and the other part is substantive. That means if you grant a child a chance to have a statement, that statement should be substantive. So a parent should be there. A fifth grader is limited in their ability to articulate mitigating circumstances that would have bearing on the decision of the decision maker. And all of these things must take place before a decision is made to determine if a student should be suspended out of school, whether it's short-term or long-term. This process should occur before that decision is made and not after the decision is made. So due process has to occur, and due process means two things: process and substance. If a BEH youngster was accused of a violation, someone would intercede on that BEH student's behalf, the parent or an advocate, etc. There's no difference for a fifth grader who's a level 1 student having a very difficult time articulating the mitigating circumstances that brought about the allegations that might result in a student being put out of school. So I'd simply ask the Board of Education to take a hard look on the right of appeal by the parent and that student so that the due process rights are maintained. And I'd also ask the Board of Education to ask if Givens versus Poe is still the law of the land. If it is the law of the land, then I think you're going to have to take a second look at that process as to how that decision is made regarding whether or not the kid will be allowed to stay in school until such time a substantive due process part of that hearing is accomplished. I could say a whole lot more, but you guys got a lot on your agenda tonight, but I just simply to seriously take a look at it. And that case arrived. All righty, my time's up. Thank you very much, and look forward to hearing from you in terms of what you plan to do. Thank you so much.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Mr. Griffin. Okay. So let's see here. And we have no emails related. Madam Clerk, did we receive any emails relating to the proposed revisions to policy JKD?
Madam Chair, there are none.
Okay. I now declare this public hearing closed. So now we're going to move on to requests from the public. And the rules are as follows. Each speaker will be called in to speak one at a time unless you are part of a group. Each speaker will have a maximum of 3 minutes to address the board, and groups will have 10 minutes. Each speaker may speak on any topic of their choice, except for individual student matters or specific personnel matters. And personal attacks will not be allowed. Profanity or other inappropriate language will not be allowed. And the board reserves the right to cut off and mute any speaker who violates these rules. With that, if you could please allow the first, let's start with the first 2 speakers into the room, and that is Stacy Staggs and then Ray Lagrone. And after that, we will have a group. I'll call their names after these 2 speakers. Hi, Ms. Staggs.
Hello, thank you. Can you
Go
hear
right
me?
ahead. Yep, we hear you fine. Go right ahead.
Thank you. I want to thank the board for the opportunity to speak up and reiterate concerns I have about the handling of COVID-19, the school reopening plan, and what I see as gaps in transparency and accountability that manifest in the CMS dashboard. But I also want to pull back on my perspective a little bit because in recent weeks, we've been really in the weeds about data point calculations, dashboard comparisons, and stoplight colors. We've tried every strategy from dismissing the danger, pretending it's past, and cherry picking data, to trading snarky sarcasm online. And all the while, the infection spreads, the rate accelerates, and our community is in increasing danger. So what if we tried a new tactic? What if we all collectively agreed to take this seriously? What if we tried prudence? What if the board members understood that your personal risk tolerance is not a sole driver of the decisions you make as a leader? Governor Cooper held a press conference today and said, quote, "The numbers are too high." Secretary Mandy Cohen also said, quote, "We're on shaky ground." Governor Cooper, "The science shows the transmission of this virus is much higher indoors." And that was before dropping the gathering limit from 25 to 10, while excluding schools and churches. Governor Cooper, quote, "We are entering dangerous times as the weather gets colder." We're all tired. A lot of us are angry, and we are looking at a dismal winter. As every one of us wants to return to classroom learning in Plan A, but it's important to remember the quickest route to Plan A is Plan C now. In fact, the people who are screaming the loudest for Plan A are the same people who are keeping us from it. Parents are not feeling confident, staff's not feeling supported, and we're asking too much of our children because we're failing as adults. CMS has huge and important open items that need urgent attention. Communication is lacking in a number of ways that include transparency and accountability. The board so far appears unable to pivot as new studies are published that speak to the importance of proper ventilation, the record number of new cases among students who are school-aged, and legitimate, reasonable concerns brought by staff. I know you know that lives depend on your commitment to do better. Even as people survive and recover from the acute infection, information we're learning about long-term impacts is grim. None of it's encouraging.
Thank you, Ms. Staggs. Okay, Ms. Lagrone, and then following Ms. Lagrone, we've got a group to bring in, which will be Kayla Nugent, Catherine Beloga, Veronica Bofa, and Brielle Nugent. So Ms. Lagrone, go right ahead.
Hi, thank you so much for having me tonight. Tonight, I'm asking the school board to look into the HR policy that medical accommodations can be terminated according to staffing needs. Accommodations are given based on CDC guidelines of who is most at risk for serious long-term health complications and death. To waive these for state tests shows a profound lack of empathy or regard for human life. I have been told it is HR policy not to give medical accommodations for semester 2 at a time when health risks are mounting exponentially. This is, I assume, due to staffing issues. If a school cannot provide bathroom breaks, time for lunch, or time to plan for teachers due to medical accommodations, the fact is that schools are not staffed to open. The solution is virtual learning and not refusal of medical accommodations. HR should continue to grant medical accommodations based on CDC guidelines and doctor approval. If the district's medical accommodations are so high that school-based staff do not have time to use the restroom, eat, and plan, then CMS is not prepared to staff in-person learning. I call on all CMS staff watching this to not turn on one another. Staff in buildings do not blame teachers teaching virtually due to medical accommodations for understaffing in schools. Staff at home recognize the uphill battle occurring in the classrooms and buses. Come together to demand the district has a real plan for staffing in-person learning, or it returns to Plan C. I greatly appreciate this time to talk, and I hope you guys have a great evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. LeGros. All right, next we'll be hearing from the group of Kayla Nugent, Catherine Beloga, Veronica Bofa, and Brielle Nugent, and I hope that I pronounced those names right. Forgive me if I didn't. And as a group, you have 10 minutes total, cumulative.
Good evening. Hi, my name is Brielle Nugent, and unfortunately, our district lead, Catherine Titty, could not attend tonight, so I'm going to be using my time to read her speech for her. Hello, my name is Catherine Titty, and I am the district lead for Diversify Our Narrative CMS. Diversify Our Narrative is a student-led initiative fighting to combat racism in our school system through the incorporation of diverse and anti-racist text. I decided to work with this initiative because I believe in the importance of representation in our lessons and the novels that we read. Lessons taught in CMS should reflect the diversity of students in their classrooms. Culturally, responsive curriculum allows students to connect their home lives to their school lives and relates lessons to students' experiences. Working to accommodate instruction to the cultural differences of students increases the depth of what we learn. When reading novels written by people of color or people within different cultures, we can take time to examine the different cultures and lifestyles seen in the text. As a group, we believe that learning about the cultures other than our own encourages acceptance and racial tolerance. In the end, we want CMS students to graduate and continue to grow into compassionate, accepting leaders in their communities. If we teach students to value and respect those different races, ethnicities, and cultures, we can then actively work to dismantle implicit biases and better address racism in our own school system. We propose that all English classes should read at least one book by and about a person of color. If we can work with you, the Board of Education, to achieve this goal, all students will feel visible and heard in their classrooms as they feel their racial and cultural identity is accepted and valued. Thank you.
Hi, my name is Veronica Bofa. I'm the second speaker, and I go to Harding University High School. I went to Randolph Ivy Middle School, which is in a white-dominated area, and I never saw many people of color in positions of power. And it made me think of how the IB program teaches us to be socially aware on global issues, but only to a certain surface level. And we never learned about systemic racism and how it disproportionately affects Black and Indigenous people of color, and how the land that we stand on is on stolen Native land, and we as people of color are forced to be complacent with being oppressed. So why should learning how to be socially aware be limited to students in advanced courses such as IB? After attending Randolph and then going to Harding, which is a Title I school, I realized the extremity of the situation, which is that Harding is in West Charlotte, which is one of the many communities that are disproportionately affected. And yet most students in that area are not given the same privilege to learn about the disparities against them and how not being aware of that systematic oppression is what causes those disparities. And having classes study and analyze books such as The Hate U Give or Blood on the River, they introduce subjects of racism and the injustices towards our Indigenous tribes to our classrooms. And these are just a few ways that Diversify Our Narrative can make an impact, because we're committed to using the education system to educate our students on BIPOC issues in a dynamic and transformative fashion to combat oppression for equity in our community. Thank you.
Hello, I'm Catherine Beloga, and I'm a senior in the IB program at Myers Park High School. And I'm also part of Diversify Our Narrative. And I'm here to talk to you guys about how we plan to integrate this type of learning into courses outside of IB and how it's already being done in schools and how that can be expanded further. So in my personal experiences with IB literature, we've actually been lucky enough to read a lot of really diverse texts from differently cultured authors that address different racial perspectives. However, I do find that the conversations that we have in these classes can be a bit lacking because the teachers are not really given the resources to discuss these topics, which can be sensitive, especially if you're in a class which does not have a lot of people who are of color. However, in the classes where there are students of color, it's very important that they do feel that they have a place to express their culture in a safe space and to feel heard and feel valid and supported in their schools. So with Diversify Our Narrative, we plan to provide teachers a list of books that show these diverse authors, as well as helping them plan curriculum through sample lesson plans, which will help them lead discussions in their classrooms, which Diversify Our Narrative hopes to be able to work with CMS in order to ensure that these things are implemented in CMS classrooms. Thank you.
Thank you. And does that conclude the comments for your group?
We actually have one member who I do not believe was let into the room. Her name is Cynthia.
Oh, okay.
She's speaking on behalf of a member who could not be here tonight.
I'm sorry, Catherine. Cynthia Jolly, is that who you're looking for?
Yes.
Buddy. My name is
All
Cynthia.
right. So, sorry about that. Go right ahead.
I'll be talking on behalf of Catherine Luckett. So we have a lack of representation of minorities in our curriculum. The Young Adult Library Association reported that between 2007 and 2017, the percentage of white protagonists in teens' top 10 novels was 81.5%, and non-white protagonists was 18.5%. The novel Jane Eyre, written by Charlotte Bronte, published in 1847, is representing a woman protagonist fighting for feminism and independence. Those are key points in life that can be brought up by contemporary figures. A current example of the same theme will be the book I Am Malala, the girl who was shot for education and was shot by the Taliban. It was Malala Yousafzai, a young POC activist who is influencing minority peers. In a Harvard Education Release report, 8th grade teacher Jabari Sellers realized that students do not dislike reading books. They're simply not interested in subject with a narrow perspective. They want to be able to relate to the context and see themselves through the pages. Seeing BIPOC authors, female and members of different communities can open minds into knowledge, respect, and recognition. The CMS district, as we may know, has 72% of minority enrolled. Emma Olivares, a Hispanic student at Vance, shared her experience in our school system. The only diverse book she read in class during her whole education years was Dear Martin by Nick Stone. In middle and high school, so many students can dream of ambitious position, witnessing the possibility for change and diversity. In order to build an equitable world, representation of minority as leaders in our books give teenagers a sense of inspiration for a promising future. We need to give people that mirror. We need to diversify our narrative.
All right, thank you very much. Good job, guys. So next we have, the next three speakers will be Fran Holloman, followed by Aaron DeMund, and then Haley Rowley.
Good evening, Superintendent Winston, Madam Chair, and members of the board. My name is Fran Holloman. I'm honored to serve as the school psychologist at Bruns Avenue Elementary School, and I'm also serving this year as the president of the Metrolina Association of Psychologists in the Schools. And I wanted to take a moment this evening to recognize that this week is National School Psychology Week, and this year's theme is the power of possibility, which emphasizes how focusing on possibilities can help lead us to our goals, our interests, and our positive growth. School psychologists help empower children to grow in a variety of ways, including social skills, empathy, and compassion for others, as well as problem solving, goal setting, and study skills. The belief in our ability to grow and develop, even in stressful circumstances, has become especially salient since this past spring. As you may know, CMS currently employs 97 school psychologists with an additional 6 psychologists who work with our pre-K team. School psychologists provide a broad range of services to support students' academic achievement and social emotional well-being. When I explain my job to my students, I tell them that school psychologists work to make sure that everyone at school is happy, well-behaved, and learning the best they can. I wanted to highlight some of the important work that the amazing school psychologists in our district have done in the first quarter of this school year alone, when much of our work was still completely virtual. So keep that in mind as I tell you some of these statistics. So in the first quarter, school psychologists served a total of 2,747 students, including 1,779 served through academic and mental health supports, and 1,650 students served as part of exceptional children's evaluations. School psychologists engaged in 2,656 consultation sessions with parents, teachers, and other stakeholders about how to best support students. We conducted 362 individual counseling sessions with 97 unique students. We had 273 conferences with students. We went on 141 home visits. We attended 251 MTSS leadership team meetings and 863 student services PLC meetings. We conducted 193 trainings for CMS staff, as well as 26 trainings for parents. And that's just a very small selection of the many wonderful things that school psychologists accomplished to support our students during the first quarter of this school year. By harnessing the power of possibility, school psychologists help students to reach their potential. We appreciate the continued support of the board and the work that we do, and we hope that you are each able to see the power of possibility in your work as well. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you, Ms. Holloman. Thank you. Ms. DeMund?
Thank you. Good evening, board members and Superintendent Winston. I am the parent of 3 CMS students, one in elementary, one in middle, and one in high school. And my husband and I are both teachers in CMS. We are deeply invested in and impacted by the decisions of this board. I'm concerned about the worsening public health metrics in our community. While schools may not be centers of disease spread, it is reasonable to assume that conditions in schools mirror those in the community at large. It's troubling to watch us move ahead with plans to bring more students back into our buildings as conditions worsen. I'm particularly concerned with bringing older students, who our own public health officials have said contract and spread COVID-19 at the same rate as adults, into our buildings. Our current plan will require high school students, including those who have chosen the full remote academy, to return to buildings in December for standardized testing. I know the board does not have the authority to waive these tests or to allow them to be conducted remotely. However, current grading policy also dictates that the scores on those tests account for 20% of a student's final grade, making it all but impossible to pass the course without this exam. There must be a way to amend or seek a waiver for this grading policy to allow students flexibility during this public health crisis. Many of the families who chose the full remote academy did so because their child or members of their household are at high risk of complications from COVID. Some families have chosen the full remote academy having already lost family members to this disease. This is not hypothetical. I know families who have lost loved ones to COVID and families with children at high risk. Imagine that you are a high school student enrolled in the full remote academy, one who has been working hard this semester. Imagine you have lost a parent to COVID, that you have a sibling or other household member who is high risk. Now imagine being faced with the choice to fail your class or go into an environment that puts you or your family at risk. Much has been said about the social and emotional pain caused to our students by this pandemic. Forcing students to choose between failing a class and entering a high-risk situation is a trauma that we can choose not to inflict. I hope the board will think creatively and compassionately and will find an alternative for these high school students. I'd also like to draw attention to the metrics dashboard and my disappointment in the district's lack of response to changing school readiness and public health conditions. Prior to the start of school, a source of concern for me was that the district was making decisions about returning staff and students to buildings in the absence of metrics to guide that process. Many families, including mine, chose full remote academy in part because we did not have information about how the district would decide when to send students back in person. When the district first presented the dashboard, I was hopeful that transparency in decision-making would follow. Public health metrics and school readiness metrics have deteriorated since these decisions were made about returning to buildings, yet the district moves ahead with the plans made under more favorable conditions. The district's chosen metrics do not seem to be guiding the decisions as many of us had hoped. As I said in the beginning, thank you.
Thank you very much. Haley Rowley, and then after Ms. Rowley, we will have Amanda Thompson and then Dorina Cooper. Actually, Amanda Thompson Rice. Ms. Rowley.
I'm Haley Rowley and I'm a teacher in CMS. I am speaking to you tonight on behalf of educators in this district who've been sent the resounding message from our district leadership of how dispensable we are. I stand alongside hundreds across this district in informing you, our board members, that we are not getting a transparent picture of how safe reentry is being implemented across this district. We're furious, scared, confused, and exhausted from the gaslighting. The educators are not all right. There are several concerns that need to be addressed by our leadership, but rather than speak for myself, I'll lift up a few stories from the ones I stand beside doing this work every day, even as our faith in this system continues to dwindle. Leaving reporting of COVID numbers up to principals is not fair. Some staff are informed while others have to find out by word of mouth. The lack of transparency is disrespectful. Why are schools not communicating with their staff about the number of positive cases in schools? Why is it a secret? Why are staff finding out about their schools having positive cases on the news? I need a space to work with less people. I need the same grace and flexibility that's given to teachers, instructional assistants, especially high risk like myself. I have no options when it comes to protecting our safety. We're in and out of classrooms and sharing close quarters with other staff, some who don't follow the mask protocol, but yet we haven't been notified when teachers we work with may have COVID. I need to feel like I have a choice. I need a job. I'm a single widowed mom. I have no choice in what I do regardless of how safe or unsafe I feel it is. All extensions and pre-K students should follow the K-5 schedule so their areas can be deep cleaned on Wednesdays. They should be given time to plan and work with colleagues on PD on the asynchronous days like all the other staff in the building. If we have a driver shortage indicative of changing the middle school schedule, how can we be at 86% yellow for that metric? Can we have effective thermometers that don't read 94 to 96 degrees in car duty in the mornings? I need nitrile gloves. The size large vinyl ones fall off my hands and I can't perform procedures with them. I have 6 kids in my room on Plan B and 13 at home. The kids are combined for Connect but can't play together at recess. The whole thing is disjointed and confusing for the kids. What is the official policy for entering and leaving the full remote academy? What is the rubric used for determining remote assignments? Why are remote assignments due to expire December 31st? Why aren't spouses and family members with immunocompromised conditions not a valid reason for remote assignments? HR approved my doctor's note to work remotely due to me being high risk. My principal denied me. What do I do now? I teach kindergarten. Even if I wear a mask all day, I'm holding scissors, pencils, etc. that my students have just touched because I have to. I'm teaching them for the first time to write and cut. I'm zipping up their jackets, cleaning up their desks, opening things for them that they cannot open for themselves, and pulling my mask down to show them what my mouth looks like when I produce different letters and sounds. It's impossible for me to keep myself safe through all of this. The phrase consider is used a lot on the metrics dashboard for the various scenarios. This is vague language that allows the board to pick and choose what they pay attention to, the metrics or not. There should be very clear-cut rules for the various data points. If blank is red, then blank will happen. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, we've Ms. Thompson Rice and then Ms. Cooper.
Hello, my name is Amanda Thompson Rice. I'm a parent and an educator and community advocate of CMS. CMS can have the most equitable, viable curriculum, all the right tools and equipment. But if you don't have educators and students, what do we have? Without question, teachers are the central to student success. Teachers' well-being is a critical and often overlooked part of school health. Pre-pandemic, education was already one of the most stressful, demanding, and under-supported professions, leading to national teacher strikes, shortages, and high rates of turnover. As an educator and former math coach, I understand teacher wellness is one of the key levers to student outcomes. Failing to address the mental health needs of educators may affect their ability to address the critical needs among students. Healthy educators lead to stable schools and to teaching effectiveness and student achievement. On CMS website, it states, the safety, health, and well-being of our students, staff, families, and communities is a top priority. Are your actions showing that? Today alone, I had 3 educators tell me they're going to quit, retire, or go on leave in the upcoming days. They are burnt out and cannot maintain their own mental and physical health and give their students what they need. No one can pour from an empty cup. Enough is enough. How can we promote teacher wellness? Begin with master schedules that allow for educators to breathe, think, plan, and at least eat. Bus drivers must be kept safe by giving them masks to give the students who arrive who have just forgotten their mask. Staff should not be learning about cases in their schools from the news. That creates greater anxiety and stress. We need transparent communication to staff when cases are on their campus. We cannot juggle it all and still be effective. Educators being forced to follow 3 different schedules, such as in the K-8, would be cumbersome and not equitable for those educators, students, and those families. When teacher wellness becomes a norm, so will student success. We cannot fix the stress or problems that we did not create as educators. Please review your current practices and offer support to teachers and educators and change the culture of demanding more. We understand that schools need to be flexible in their accommodation for their individual situations, but educators need limits on what they are asked to do and assurances the working conditions will be reasonable and realistic. Ask for and heed for our input and problem solving, because collectively we have the answers because we're doing the work. If the ultimate goal of education is to promote student success, teacher well-being must be the center of those considerations. Remember, teaching conditions are student learning conditions. Would you be satisfied with your rating today?
Thank you. Okay, next we have Dorina Cooper, followed by Chris Michael, and then Sarah Lang. Ms. Cooper?
Yes. Good evening, board members and Superintendent Winston. I asked to speak to you this evening as I feel there needs to be clarity regarding the screening process and the process in which positive and potentially positive cases are communicated. To my understanding, if a student comes to school and is sent to the isolation room with symptoms that could potentially be related to COVID, the parents or guardians are given an option as to what needs to happen before the student can return to school. Those options being stay home for 10 days or get a COVID test to determine the positive or negative case. If I happen to be that teacher who had a student or sibling of a student in his or her classroom that went to isolation, I then could be exposed. At this point, teachers with potential exposure are now forced to make decisions as to what they should do. Questions like, how long should I wait before I get tested to make sure I haven't contracted COVID? How soon will I have symptoms if I was exposed? Do I report to work? How do I answer the questions on this screener? If I was exposed and am not showing symptoms, could I potentially expose others? Should I go around my family? I have a condition that makes me high risk. How can I not let this worry me? When will I be notified if there is a positive case reported, or even will I? And so many other questions. The screeners are only as accurate as the information being input into them. And if 6 students are making it into the buildings, how accurate is that input? I bring this concern because I am that teacher. I am that teacher who spent my weekend trying to answer these questions, worrying, alone, uncontrollably crying at times, isolating myself from my family, exhausted, and not knowing exactly what to do. This is my reality. Transparency and handling of confirmed and potential cases is not there. As numbers rise and we are faced with these situations, our health and well-being physically, mentally, and emotionally are being compromised. What is going to be done to ensure the health and wellness, social and emotional well-being of teachers, school staff, students, and make sure the process by which we receive communication regarding cases is handled with transparency?
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Michael and then Ms. Lang.
Okay, thank you. I'd like to thank the board for hearing me, and I would also like to thank the board for making the right decisions back in March and April when the virus first hit the communities. And it is my hope that you will make the right decision again. I am here as an elementary art teacher advocating for the health and safety of all elementary teachers, physical as well as mental and emotional health. The source of my concern stems from not just the fear of not just contracting the virus, but also spreading the virus. The current situation with classroom teachers being isolated and teaching from one room all day is not as safe as believed. Everybody knows children are not susceptible or not as susceptible to catching the virus or spreading the virus. Doesn't mean that they can't, but they're not as susceptible. Children, but teachers are adults. We are susceptible. And classroom teachers, being in the classroom, removing masks to drink water, to eat, and from what I heard from the kindergarten teacher earlier, all kinds of things. This is not ideal. The virus is airborne. Mask reduce transmission, but without N95 medical grade mask, we are only stopping the water droplets from talking, coughing, sneezing. We are still inhaling and exhaling air. The virus is airborne. It is also known that a person's collective exposure of the virus increases the chances of contracting and spreading the virus. I understand the idea of keeping teachers and students isolated in an environment in hopes that it reduces the chances of spreading the virus. But now, here comes the special area teacher, pushing into the classroom, which may be that classroom teacher's only chance to leave that room. Once the teacher returns to the classroom, the special area teacher leaves that room and goes to the next classroom where that teacher has been in this closed environment for a long time, and then so on and so on and so on. Okay, the virus is airborne, collective exposure, special area teacher, class to class. The virus has been called an invisible enemy, and that we are fighting a war with an invisible enemy. I would like to think that we are not helping this enemy. But school environments and pushing in is more likely a scenario that we are helping it. An enemy that will be defeated, hopefully, by this summer through vaccines that are on their way. This news of vaccines that are found to be 90% effective came out the day before Mary Ward, a North Carolina elementary art teacher, died of COVID.
Thank you, Mr. Michael. Okay, Ms. Lang, I believe you are our last speaker tonight.
Good evening, everybody, and thank you so much for taking the time to listen to my concerns. My name's Sarah Lang, and I am the mother of 3 girls who attend what I think is the best K-8 in Charlotte-Mecklenburg schools, Charlotte East Language Academy. I have a kindergartner, a 5th grader, and a 7th grader who attend school there, and I'm here to talk to you about the unique needs of our K-8 schools with regards to the return of middle school students in person. I would like to request that you please allow middle school and elementary students in our K-8s to be on the same schedule upon middle school students' return. Most of our K-8 schools have smaller numbers of students in their middle schools and therefore can fold into the same A-B schedule that mimics the elementary schedule. This is really important for several reasons. First of all, as a parent, the logistics to have children on different schedules is a bit of a nightmare and almost impossible to manage. And it's one of the big reasons that we chose to have our kids in K-8 schools is to have less separate schedules that our students are on. I'm also concerned that we're asking schools to manage students on various schedules within the same school and the ramifications of that. Imagine communicating about rotation A for middle school students being different than rotation A for elementary students and what that the communication issues that brings about. I'm also concerned about the cross-contamination, for lack of a better word, if middle school students are on a different schedule than elementary. There are shared spaces, no matter whether we're social distancing or not within the school, that if we have middle school students on one schedule and they're here for an A week, and then we have AB students in elementary, for example, on the buses, then those A students, their A week may be at a different time than the other elementary students, and those AB elementary students are going to end up seeing A, B, and C middle school students at different points. And then also, this is not the case in my household, but I'm aware that a lot of middle school students are helping their younger siblings with remote learning. And when they're on different schedules, oftentimes this is going to cause students to be left home alone, which we do not want to have to see. So when middle school students do return, I really want to request that they be together, and they are going to need to be on a different schedule than possibly the rest of the middle schools. So they should be able to return as scheduled, but do that on the same schedule as elementary students. I really thank you for taking your time to listen to my concerns and hope that you consider that a one-size-fits-all approach does not work for our K-8 schools with regards to middle school students returning. Thank you.
Thank you very much, and thank you for everyone for showing up to speak tonight. Okay, we will now move on to the consent items. Is there a motion that the board approve the consent agenda items?
So moved.
Second.
All right, motion from Ms. Sawyer, second from Ms. De La Hara. Before we move to a vote, does any board member wish to pull any part of this item for individual consideration? Hearing none, let's move on to the vote. All those in favor, please raise your hands and say yes. Yes.
Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Okay, Madam Clerk, our consent agenda is approved by a unanimous vote of 9-0. Okay, let's move on to reports and information items. First will be a report on our budget amendments for September 20.
Madam Chair, forgive me for a moment, please.
Oh, personnel, you have some personnel appointments. I am so sorry. I'm off my game tonight.
You're fine. I know it's been a long day. Thank you very much. Would it be appropriate now to?
Please do. Yes, let's meet the new, let's hear it. Let's hear your announcements.
Wonderful. Thank you very much. Madam Chair, board members, I am pleased tonight to announce 2 personnel appointments that I want to share with both the board and the public. First, we have Melissa Roy. Melissa Roy is the new principal at Barnett Elementary School. Prior to coming over to Barnett very soon, Principal Roy served previously as an assistant principal at Francis Bradley Middle School, which is just a stone's throw away. And she's been there since 2014, serving in that capacity. She's also served as an assistant principal at Hickory Grove Elementary from 2011 to 2014, and at Rivergate Elementary from 2010 to 2011. Again, I'm pleased to announce Ms. Roy as the new principal at Barnett, and she has joined us this evening, and I would invite her to provide some brief remarks if she would like to.
Yes, thank you so much, Superintendent Winston. I want to thank you for the amazing opportunity to serve Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools as the principal at Barnett Elementary. I also want to thank Mrs. Aquanetta Edmond and the Northwest Learning Community for their continued support and guidance throughout my leadership journey. Ms. Edmond hired me as the first assistant principal position I had 10 years ago and continues to mentor me today. Lastly, I want to thank all of the amazing leadership that I've had in CMS that has helped mold me as a leader, especially Ms. Amy Mims and Mrs. Penny Presley. It is both an honor and a privilege to be chosen as the next leader of Barnett, and I look forward to serving the students, staff, and families as the newest principal. Thank you so much for the opportunity.
Thank you, Ms. Roy. Next up is Dr. Katie Sunseri, who is our new Executive Director of Federal Programs. Dr. Sunseri has been the Director of Advanced Studies in CMS since 2018, and she was a math curriculum coordinator for Project LIFT between 2016 and 2018. She was also an interim principal in 2015, as well as an assistant principal and a dean of students at North Mecklenburg High School. And she also taught at Garinger High School from 2008 to 2011. And so I'm very excited to announce Dr. Sunseri as our new Executive Director of Federal Programs. And I would also like to invite Dr. Sunseri to share a few brief remarks as she is with us this evening as well.
Thank you so much, Madam Chair, members of the board, Superintendent Winston. I really just want to say thank you. Thank you for this incredible opportunity. I am just absolutely honored. I am excited to really just continue to serve the students and educators in CMS, just in this different capacity. I have here with me this evening my husband, Wesley, to join in for this announcement. But I'm just so incredibly excited. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you, Dr. Sunseri, and Mr. Sunseri as well. Thank you.
Awesome, thank you, welcome. Okay, so now let's move on to the reports and information items, starting with the report on the budget amendment for September 2020. I will turn to you, Mr. Superintendent, for this report.
As presented, Madam Chair.
Okay. Next, we have a report on financial statements for September 2020. I turn to the superintendent for this report.
Also as presented, Madam Chair.
Okay. And then next will be a report on readiness metrics, and I will turn to the superintendent for this report.
Thank you again, Madam Chair. As you know, it has become a regular occurrence at our Board of Education meetings to have our Chief School Performance Officer and head of our Metrics Advisory Committee, Ms. Kathy Elling, be with us. And so tonight, as she has done in the past, she's going to update us on the latest district COVID-19 metrics dashboard. Before Ms. Elling makes this week's presentation, I will note that this week's numbers include our K-5 students who attended in-person instruction last week, bringing the total number of students in our buildings to more than 40,000. And I think with that level of in-person attendance, we're confident in our ability to maintain anonymity for students as required under FERPA. So for the first time this week, we began posting a listing of confirmed COVID cases by school. Ms. Elling, thank you again for being here this week to present our health and safety metrics update. With that, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thank you, Superintendent, and good evening, board members. I will share the metrics from our live dashboard. So for parents and guardians, knowing they go to our homepage and you're going to click on the tile that says Metrics Dashboard. I want to talk through two different types of reports that we're generating to be sure that everyone is clear. This is a week at a glance. It very clearly outlines that we're capturing October 31st through November 6th. And after Friday, November 6th, after 5 o'clock on Friday, we put a lockdown, so to speak, on the data, meaning we have had positive cases arrive late on Friday night that get rolled into the next week. So right now you are seeing that, as Superintendent Winston mentioned, we have 41,688 students and we have 11 positive cases this week in students. We have all of our employee numbers here, and we believe that's important because all our employees impact our ability to serve students well. And that includes our bus drivers, custodians, cafeteria, all of our school-based personnel, and non-school-based personnel. And among that number, you notice we have 29 staff members that are positive. That does not represent 29 school-based staff members, but it represents a total of 29 employees and staff members for us across the district. A new report this week, you heard the superintendent reference, and that is the breakdown report. Again, this is the case count from 6 p.m. after 6 p.m. on Friday, October 30th through November 6th. And these are positive cases that have been identified by school for students and staff members. I want to highlight the difference between suspected case and positive case. A suspected case could be an individual child or adult who presents symptoms that may signal COVID-19. And in that case, we enact protocols that you have been made aware of regarding the isolation room. Both staff and students are screened coming into the building. And if they present any kind of symptoms that resonate around COVID, they're in the isolation room. It's important to note that we are not capturing on this document suspected cases because we need confirmation from the health department that we actually have a positive case. When we receive a positive case notification, there are two types of communications that go directly to through school communication. One is you have a positive case in your school, and it's called just a general notification of non-close contact, but that there is a case located at the school. If you are a close contact of the positive case, you receive communication that indicates you're a close contact, and that you are encouraged to see your medical professional. And if you're deemed close contact, you are quarantined for 14 days. That is a CDC requirement, and our health department follows that requirement. We have both internal communication that we send, and then the health department, when they have logged that positive case in their database, sends us a letter that that school principals can send to individuals, both in the school community of that school and the actual individual that tests positive, indicating additional protocols around that. I want to direct you to, this will be an alphabetical list that will change every week. This is a week in time. This is not like the dashboard, which captures a 14-day period. I think that's important to note as well. I'm going to go to the next dashboard. Oh. Hold on one second. I don't need that one. Again, it's the metrics tile. And then you're going, whoop, didn't click. The metrics tile it didn't give me the metrics tile. Let me go back. Here we go. My apologies for the delay. This is the weekly, or this is the dashboard report. This is a 14-day period. And I want to talk through these numbers that you're seeing. So we have had a slight increase in the amount of cases that we're observing in the community. And I'm going to walk through this section, then I want to add some comments relative to school experience to these numbers. We have, so the 136 puts us in the red, which is over the 100 cases per 100,000 individuals. The positivity rate is a slight tad uptick from last week, or last week, and it still puts us in the yellow at 5 to 10%. It's important to note that we look at these numbers in combination with every other metric that we're tracking in consultation with our health department officials to make decisions in preparation to make a recommendation through the superintendent for the board to consider. Right now, we have 42 schools with one or more positive case in the last 14-day period. It's important to note that of those positive cases, we believe through case investigation that those cases did not originate at the school. These cases involve community spread, both with adults, more so than children, in fact, are in the community outside of the school hours, and then they become infected and come into the school building. What's important to note is that we have no schools that have more than 25 individuals who are quarantined as a result of a positive case. And I want to share that cases in a school, that means the number of schools, the number of individuals at a specific school that have tested positive is 10 schools with 2 or more individuals. This signals to us, and we know based on our investigation, that these cases at schools are not related. It may be a teacher in one situation and an athlete in another situation, but both involving the same school. The good news, additionally, is that we have 0 clusters. Clusters are defined by the state as 5 or more related cases, and that is an indication of spread within the school community, and we are not within individual schools, and we are not seeing that. We are being cautious around quarantines and being careful around notifying and making sure we scoop up close contacts. And we have 5 schools now that are 15 or more active quarantines. We were told from health department officials to expect greater numbers of quarantines because we have situations with in some cases with younger children who need more support, who have closer contact both with adults and younger children. The social distancing is something they're still working on, so they may be deemed a close contact. But we have just 5 schools at this point. Our district operational metrics are holding at 84% for child nutrition. You're going to hear transportation. That 84% number actually reflects 6 vacancies in transportation and 122 additional drivers on leave, approved leave, and you'll hear some about that. And nurses, custodial is holding solid, and nurses is at 42%. I want to share with you the instructional number, and it's holding solid at 96.5%. What's important to know about that number, as listed there, it's a total number of all teaching staff that are in person and remote. We believe if teachers that are teaching remotely should contact the virus, they are also recorded in our numbers because that changes our ability potentially to serve a group of students through a content area or classroom. School facilities are in good shape for all of our PPE, hallway markings, signage, protective shields in front offices, hallway markings, all of that. Middle school teachers came back to school this week and they're continuing to set up classrooms for social distancing, and that's why that number reflects yellow. Finally, the two categories that we're tracking are PPE and infection control and safety and health, and those are all above 95% at this point. I guess what I would sum up with, Mr. Superintendent, before entertaining any questions, is that the dashboard was created as a way to provide a framework for decision making. I know it's challenging when you consider metrics and making a decision around an exact number that would trigger an action or not. But that is not what we designed this for. This was to be designed so that we would know how to have conversations and with whom about next steps. I also want to highlight that part of the considerations that we're talking about weekly include how is it going in our schools? How is the reporting going? And schools have done a good job of reporting. Principals are on top of that. Schools are not considered major places for transmission of this virus, as indicated by the number of student cases we're seeing. And so I would say at this point, Mr. Superintendent, that would conclude my comments.
Thank you, Ms. Elling. We'll turn it back over to Madam Chair.
Get my screen back into the grid. All right, do we have any questions for Ms. Elling before we move on to the next agenda item? Ms. Sawyer?
Thank you. Thank you, Ms. Selling. Can you give us a sense of the timeline for notification, so of and how people can expect to receive a notification?
Yes. So the notification process I've explained, the timeline is as soon as we get confirmed positive results of an individual. We have been notifying as school-based personnel have indicated that they are symptomatic. We have been starting contact tracing around that, so we know who's in the potential area. So they should receive, as soon as we have a confirmed case, the two notifications. One, we've got a positive case at your school, and or you are deemed close contact, and there's procedures that you should follow. So the time frame varies, Carol, in terms of, Ms. Sawyer, I apologize, varies depending upon how quickly we can get that information.
But folks shouldn't expect a notification if a colleague or a child says, I think I have it.
We are not notifying, I think I have it. In fact, I want to make it real clear that the protocol per the health department is that we notify suspected cases. I apologize, positive cases. We do not notify around suspected cases. It's just not an appropriate methodology to track this data source. And there's a lot of symptoms that mimic COVID-19, and we're headed into flu season. So that's another indication that we are not a medical organization. So we're taking the medical input and making determinations. I want to reinforce that our school nurses on consult or in buildings are also helping provide as quick notification as we can in instances. And our on-call support, the Mecklenburg County Health Department, has been exceptional, both in the communicable disease department and our nurses dedicated to that hotline to provide immediate support.
Thank you.
Ms. Cheek?
I think somebody else was ahead of me, but I'll go ahead.
I'm sorry. I am sorry.
I'm sure that I think Gabe and Margaret had already put their hands up, and I just prefer to make sure that we're all in order and playing the rules.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Cheek. All right, so I will go to Mr. Shul and then Ms. Marshall.
Okay, thank you. Sorry for the confusion. So I was just wondering if there was a threshold positivity rate that would lead us to delay either going to middle school or high school.
That is a fabulous question. We have been talking with both the medical director of the health department, and there's not a precise number because it's the interplay between the number of cases and the positivity rate. So we are having conversations every week around the number, and we plan to have another conversation at the end of this week to see where it is, but it's not a precise formula, Gabe, so unfortunately it's not.
Okay, has any thought been put into like specifically to the delaying of middle school, whether this like threshold, this positivity rate and the interplay with the cases constitutes it delaying?
Ms. Ellen, if I could just take a quick stab at that, not that I could add too much more than what you have, but I think, Gabe, that's it's a great question, but it's a challenging response because it takes into account not just the community metrics that we're looking at, but it also we have to take into account what our staffing metrics are. So I wish it were as cut and dry as just looking at the two community health metrics, but obviously we've got to consider a whole lot of other factors. And obviously those conversations that we have on an ongoing basis with our colleagues at the county health department factor into that as well. So all that to say that it's a number of factors and it's complicated.
Mm-hmm. Well, yeah, I mean, I think I'm just thinking ahead to the action item we have on whether to delay the return of middle schools. And I'm wondering if there was, some medical input, if the medical team has come together and given us an idea of sorts. But my second question was about whether we had any thought to notifying all personnel in a school about a recent positive case outside of close contact.
Yeah, let me be clear that everybody who is a staff member at that school should get notification.
Okay.
Thank you for letting me clarify.
Yeah.
Okay, Ms. Marshall.
And really, I think to Gabe's point and to some others, from what we heard in terms of staff comments and what I've seen sort of on the internet in terms of pages, social media pages, there definitely has been a lot of confusion around notification. So I think as we have a number of students back in our buildings that weren't there before, this is a week where we got to get it right, and we're going to get it right. And I think that's really important. So to you all, I think that making sure that we are very consistent around notification, and that from my understanding, everybody in the school, staff and all students and families are notified if there's a case. And then those that are effectively have close contact will also have an additional notification. So those are possibly two notifications that folks would get. That is correct? That's
correct. Well, they're going to get either there's a case at your school or there's a case at your school and you're close contact.
Got it. Okay.
Yeah, exactly. They don't need both. They're either close contact or not, and that's the notification.
And I think we've had this is new territory for everybody. So we've had some principals that are making sure we get all the, just getting that information out as fast as we can and getting those procedures, folks will get tighter on that. I'm sure that this has been a challenging week in many ways. So we want to make sure our principals are able to communicate, but knowing that no one means to hold information. It's just
no, I think that you're absolutely correct.
The other thing, I just want to make sure that the public knows that, as you said, we have a cutoff on Friday. You have to end somewhere every week, and that will be consistent. So that cutoff is Friday, and then those results are then announced on Monday. And typically, you're doing a sort of an overview of those results, and so then we're now listing all the individual schools. So I feel like that's just the schedule, and we'll get that cadence down. And and families and staff will know what to look for and when, and that's important. And I appreciate you doing that. Thank you.
And thank you for lifting that up, Ms. Marshall. We will continue. We know that as we bring more staff and students back into the building, communication is key.
Yep.
And we will continue to reiterate that message in terms of communicating who receives what notification and within what time frame. We'll make sure we continue to communicate that.
If I could add, one of the point person for communicating positive cases, now we're talking positive cases in close contacts, is the building level administration. And then the health department also assists us with that communication process.
Great.
Ms. Cheek and then Ms. Shipp.
Thank you. And Ms. Elling, I want to tell you that I've had some positive feedback from members of the media as well as members of the community about the level of detail and how we are continuously improving the metrics that are the dashboard and all the work that you're putting into that. So I do want to say thank you. I know it's tireless and you're working so hard. The Monday debriefings have been very well received. So thank you for that. You know, I don't know if you were listening to the public comment prior to the meeting, and many teachers spoke. And so what I was just going to make sure that we could maybe highlight was we have protocols in place. I know there's been a lot of site-based training on what you do, what happens if you have an exposure and all those things, but it seems like there may be some loose ends with some of the comments that were brought up earlier during public speaking. And I want to just make sure that we do kind of button up some of that. Just because somebody was taught something, 2 weeks ago doesn't mean they remember what to do if they have an exposure and those kind of things. It may behoove us to almost send out a daily blast about it. I mean, I think the old adage is you have to read something 27 times before you commit it to memory. And so we probably haven't sent it out 27 times yet. But I just was concerned when I heard a lot of similar kind of situations that people mentioned earlier. And I know those are things that have been discussed, but and maybe we could figure out a way to revisit and retrain.
Yeah, I think that's a point well taken. We have been told the plans are solid, but our health department has also shared with us, based on observations in neighboring counties, people get comfortable with the plan and they relax around a plan. And we had met with principals today, and I said to them, do not relax, do not let your guard down. And I will share with you the concern that I have is adult to adult, not social distancing in cases where they can. We believe they can. And so that's creating situations of excessive potential quarantines that impact school level. So we're asking everybody to be mindful of their work locations and work processes, wear face coverings, stay 6 feet apart. And that will go a long way to curbing this community situation.
We remember back in July, Dr. Little from Atrium Health said that the way that the disease was being spread in the hospitals to their employees was in the break room and in settings where people are letting their guard down. And I cannot reemphasize that enough to our staff and to parents, to people everywhere. We can't let our guard down. COVID has not let its guard down. And so it's inherent that we have to put our guard up and keep it up. So I would it's hard. We're social creatures, very social creatures. And I'm so thankful for all the work they're doing right now. And it's hard. And I know some of them spoke about how they feel isolated, having to do everything in their room. But we've got to do that right now to slow the spread and the community spread. And it's going to be adult to adult, and it's going to be in close quarter settings in schools where we're going to see the spread, and we need to just keep our guard up for that. So thank you so much.
You're welcome.
Ms. Shipp?
Right. And I think almost everything's been said and asked. I do want to thank you, Ms. Ellen, for your hard work with this and what you're doing. I did want to continue to ask the question. I know you say how soon they get the results back. And if a student was on a bus, I heard one where the student was on a bus and the student was positive. I had a positive case on the bus, and they felt like then another student, they heard it from the students, it was a positive case, and they never heard from the principal that the child was positive. And then they were involved with around the teachers. So I know we have to remember to say, and I guess this is, again, it's new, it's all new, to make, how soon will they get informed?
Yeah.
And will we make sure we know on all ends, whether it's coming from a bus situation or in the classroom, because this one was considered a bus situation.
Yeah.
Making sure they know. So that they, teachers want to be informed.
Yes, and we did. When we had our first bus situation, there was some wires crossed about who transportation was notifying and who the school personnel was notifying, and we've corrected that process.
Good. And then the other thing is coverage. How is that being reported in terms of when teachers are down? What are we looking at on the metrics in terms of staffing? And we have situations where, for example, if you have in one school, 2 administrators are down, and then you have teachers down. This is really hard. And I'll say this because I've been out in the schools, I've visited, and they have shared that they had quite a few, they had staff out, and the hardest part was, and I want to thank you, those schools covering other schools, supporting other schools, it's good. But that substitute issue is a problem, and how we're looking at that on the matrix when we're having staff out, and buildings are beginning to say that coverage is going to become a problem if they can't get subs, and they quickly are having to have people out in quarantine or cases. So what are we looking at? How quickly are we?
Well, as I've shared before, we do have a fairly healthy sub pool, but subs can choose to work or not work. And so we are looking at each situation uniquely regarding who do we have access to in the building. In the case you referenced with some administrative impact, we've had other administrators go to work at that school, and that's working out well. It is very much a case-by-case situation around how the impact lands and how we can backfill the needed support for the positions.
Right. Thank you, because I know that's going to be difficult. And when schools are saying they're having to use every bit of their resources to keep things going. And then if someone is down, that's a support staff, that's even harder because every teacher is teaching in the building. And if support staff is down, and where are you going to pull from if you don't get subs? I know we had some subs already, and I want to thank the community for the subs that we had in schools already that did return to help.
And I would say our impact on staff coverage is not what we're backfilling for is the number of quarantines.
Right. That's
right. And so if we can get the adults to do their utmost to be socially distanced with face coverings, then that helps us not have quite as many close contacts that we have to figure out how we're going to cover. Some of it potentially is unavoidable. We just want it very much on the front, up front, that we need to be very careful about that.
Thank you.
Lahara, and then I'll go back to Ms. Sawyer.
Okay, thank you. Most of my questions were answered, but I do have one. This morning I was in the carpool line at Hidden Valley, and I noticed a child got out and had her mask on and a face shield. And it reminded me that at one of our previous meetings, we were informed that we were going to be purchasing face shields, again, not as a replacement for the mask for our staff to wear, but in addition to if they chose to. And I'm just curious if that, have those arrived? Are those still on order? Because I haven't necessarily, as I've been at the school, seen them, but maybe teachers are choosing not to wear them because they feel safe enough with the mask.
I certainly know that in classrooms where we have designated levels of close contact needed to provide essential services for students, in some of our smaller classroom sizes, they have received theirs. And our support teams like speech pathologists, those people that have to be very close. I don't think that we have provided I can double check. Let me not misspeak. Let me double check on what we were intending to order there and where that is in process.
Okay, that would be great. Thank you, Ms. Elling.
I'm sorry, Jeff, was that asking about students wearing them or
No,
staff?
occurred to me. It occurred to me when I saw the child choosing to do both that it just stuck in my head to remind me to ask for tonight on the status of those face masks.
Because one kindergarten class I was in, she purchased them for all her kindergarten kids. That's why I wondered if it was about the kids, and they still had on masks.
Okay, Ms. Sawyer.
Quick question about substitutes. I know we use Kelly Services for many of our subs. Have we surveyed our sub pool in Kelly Services to filter out, to find out how many are willing to work in a school building versus not? I know we have subs working virtually as well.
Yeah, that is a great question, Ms. Sawyer, and I don't have the answer to that. It certainly would make sense that we would kind of cull that list temporarily to see who would be ready. So I will certainly discuss that with our Chief Human Resource Officer.
Because I've heard we have lots of people in the Kelly pool, but when you call, they don't want to work in a school. And I think we need to know what that number is sooner rather than later.
All right, any more questions? So I just want to clarify one more time that because with elementary school students, K through 5 students back, this is a big item of concern and question. So we'll just run through it one more time. When a case has been identified through the case management system with the public health department, then there's a process that kicks into gear where the anyone who is determined to have close contact with the student or staff member with the case gets a particular letter. And it's the principal that's responsible for sending out that letter, but there's support from the county health department. So that kind of communication is done in partnership with the county health department. So when a case has been identified and you've been determined to be in close contact, you should get a letter to inform you of that. In addition, if you are working at that school on the site, or if you're a student at that school on the site, you would get a different letter saying a case has been identified at our school. But if you're in full remote academy or if you're working remotely, you would not necessarily get that letter.
Yes, because it doesn't impact, if you're a full remote, it doesn't impact you. That right? And so the notification process is about potential impact.
Okay. Because there were like a few people have said there have been a few rumors on social media in the last few days about, oh, but there was a case at such and such a school and I didn't get a letter. And so that's what we kind of need to get to the bottom of.
I think we need to be absolutely, and we are responding to confirmation of positive cases. And I will tell you, when we started this process, we actually had to work with our administrators because they were responding to potential cases and then they weren't real. And so we had to make sure that we're operating out of a protocol that's supported by our health department. And it just takes a little bit of time for people to get it, right? And so I will tell you, our staff is working, I believe, as hard as they can and as quickly as they can with the support of our health department to provide accurate information.
Okay, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
I just want to build on what Kathy, what Ms. Ellen just shared around the confirmation of positive cases. And I think people are well-meaning, have good intent. I think sometimes we may see someone who has symptoms, i.e. a student who may have exhibited symptoms on the bus or in the classroom, may have been taken to the isolation room. But just to reiterate, we're talking about confirmation of positive cases, not those impacted via quarantine or symptoms or exhibiting symptoms. So I think thank you for asking that question, Madam Chair.
And hot off the press to Ms. Jennifer De La Jara's question, we have one face shield per staff have been delivered to all elementary and middle schools. and high schools are next.
Okay. All right, on that note, let's turn to our only action item tonight, which is a proposed revision to the return to in-person instruction plan for grades 6 through 8. And before we act, I'm going to turn to the superintendent to introduce this item and to make a recommendation.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and board members again. I am pleased to report that last week, our K-5 students returned to school, in-person school, that is, in accordance with our phased return to in-person instruction. And it was absolutely great to have the opportunity to see almost 40,000 students come into our buildings for face-to-face learning with their teachers, our support staff, and their peers. And I had the honor of visiting several schools with you, Madam Chair. Absolutely enjoyed that experience. And I know several board members who also took time out of their schedules to visit and volunteer at our schools last week and this week as well. We certainly understand that the process and the procedures in place to protect our students and our staff meant some challenges the first few mornings. But I do want to acknowledge that we have a team of dedicated and talented school staff who have worked very quickly to solve those challenges, and things definitely became much smoother as the week went on. And as Ms. Elling discussed earlier, we're confident that our processes are working and pleased with how the return for K-5 has gone so far. And now I would like to have some of our staff members share with board members and members of our public where we are exactly in the process for bringing back our middle school students. And as you will note, the current phased plan calls for bringing back students in grades 6 through 8 on November the 23rd. And we are going to share some challenges tonight that we face in moving forward as voted on by this board several weeks ago. Among those challenges I wanted to note is having enough transportation staff to safely transport our students and maintain the social distancing required for students in middle school, which is mandated by Governor Cooper's current executive order. With us tonight for this presentation, we have our Executive Director of Transportation, Mr. Adam Johnson, and our Deputy Superintendent of Academics, Dr. Matt Hayes, who will both discuss the transportation challenges that make return to in-person instruction difficult for our middle schools and recommend modification to that in-person return plan. Also, certainly don't want to leave out, also joining us tonight as part of this presentation is Colette Rogers, our Executive Director of our Total Rewards in the district, who will answer questions as it relates to the leave options in staffing from a human resources perspective. So with that, I'm going to turn to Dr. Hayes and Mr. Johnson to share our presentation.
Thank you, Superintendent Winston and the board. As you saw earlier this evening, as a metrics, there we go. As the metrics showed, we had several areas in operational metrics which were in yellow. We're here this evening to speak to you of the impact of those with transportation on our ability to return middle schools. You'll hear from our transportation specialists at this point in time. We are delighted to be joined by three individuals this evening, Adam Johnson, Carol Stamper, and also Laura Francisco. And at this point in time, I'm going to turn over to Laura Francisco, who's going to take us through a couple of slides, as well as Adam Johnson. Thank you. Is Laura on the call with us?
Dr. Hayes, I'm looking at the, okay, yeah.
Yeah,
There
I
we
am
go.
now. Sorry,
Yes.
I think I was a late ad. Members of the board and Superintendent Winston, thank you and good evening. If we could go to the next slide, Matt, that would be great. Okay. My role this evening is just to kind of level set on what our current status is in transportation. We want to let you know that scheduled for this 2021 school year, we have 1,005 school buses. For those 1,005 buses, we have, and Ms. Elling mentioned this earlier, we have 122 drivers on some sort of approved leave. Either that's the federal FFCRA leave or some other type of leave that's been approved through Human Resources. We also have 6 vacancies, just positions that we don't have employees for currently. That leaves us with 877 drivers available to assign to a school bus to transport our students. It's important to note that there are a few additional employees still awaiting leave decisions. So that 877 is a little bit fluid because there are a few people still in the pipeline for leave. Of the 1,005 buses, it's also important to note that in a normal school year where we're not dealing with this current situation, we would actually have 1,088 buses on the road, but we were able to reduce that down to 1,005 because of those students who are in the full remote cohort. So by taking those students out of the mix for transportation, we are at 1,005. So what we did for this 2021 school year was for the remaining 18,115 non-full remote middle school students, we assigned each of those students to a bus. And we assigned them based on the current board approved plan to return middle schools on November 23rd. This includes 1,448 middle school students who attend a K-8 school. So that 18,115 is all non-full remote middle school students. At this point, I'm going to turn it over to our Executive Director of Transportation, Adam Johnson, to walk you through the next slides.
Thank you, Ms. Francisco, and good evening, Superintendent Winston and board members. As Ms. Francisco pointed out, we are going to try to walk you through how things have gone over the past few weeks, actually, that brought us to the point that we're at tonight. But before we do that, wanted to just give you some of the plain terms, not only for the board members, but also for the public, so they understand when we're talking about different terms in transportation, what we mean. And I know some of these seem kind of basic, but they all sort of play together in our puzzle and how we do our daily work. So we start with our assigned student. So that's a student that is eligible for transportation in the district. They have requested transportation from us, either morning, afternoon, possibly both. What we do is assign those students to a bus stop. That's a stop location that falls within department guidelines for safety, distance, and visibility. We move all those stops together and create what we call a bus run. Those are a collection of those bus stops organized geographically for efficiency, and they fall within that school's attendance boundary. And of course, obviously outside of when we have magnet schools. Next, we have a bus route. That's where we put bus runs together on one bus to make the most of the fleet that we do have. So that's the collection of the runs together. We optimize those for the efficient use of the bus fleet. So what we want to give you tonight is an example of one of our buses. Bus number 4 is a Myers Park area bus. So in a typical year, that bus could serve Myers Park High School, possibly Sharon Elementary, and a Carmel Middle School run. And pay attention to that because we'll kind of see how that would play out in this scenario with the drivers that are on approved leave and how that would impact students. Next slide, please. So what we looked at, because of the drivers that are on this approved leave, whether it's the federal leave, the FFCRA, or other approved leave through Human Resources, we have about 227 bus runs that would be uncovered because we have 128 buses without an assigned driver. That equates to approximately 7,117 students, pre-K through 8th grade. So what we're doing in order to cover those runs, and this is what we would look at in a potential return to school on November 23rd, we'd have to reassign those runs. Those 227 runs would have to go to the existing 877 buses that have assigned bus drivers. So you can tell they already have what they're doing. So again, we're going to try to piece those together where we can, which you'll imagine will cause delays. Those available buses will be running double runs, perhaps triple runs at many of the same schools. But remember that we must maintain social distancing, especially on our middle and high school buses, and those are the what we have set to 24 students per bus. So what are the potential outcomes? Well, possibly the most important here is that we can't maintain social distancing capacity with that maximum of 24 students in place, 1 student per seat. So that really does limit us because we want to maintain that health and safety of the students, and we are limited to the capacity of 24 per bus, 1 student per seat on those middle school runs. So that 7,117 students, they would be standing out there waiting at bus stops each morning and at school each afternoon. We're estimating that's going to be a substantial scheduling delay, but what I want you to know is the minimum that we would anticipate is 30 minutes, but the maximum is well over an hour. And what's also important to note here is that it's not going to be predictable, because what we leveled it out at what we know to be our vacancies because of the drivers that are on approved leave, be it federal or other. What it doesn't account for is daily absences. Still, we may have drivers that call in, they may not be feeling well, it may not be COVID related. They may have a sick child, a sick family member, a doctor's appointment, something that they have to do. And so that doesn't take into account those daily absences. So there's an impact there. The student instructional day will certainly be impacted in the morning because we'll have late arrivals to school. And in the afternoon, certainly they'll be there waiting and getting home much later than they typically would be in a normal school year. It does decrease the available time midday that we have to do whatever maintenance we need, fueling, changing tires, oil, all of those things that we do within typically about a 3-hour window is going to be compressed, because we really will have those buses out running longer in the morning and then have to turn them back around to run again in the afternoon. There certainly is a budget impact here as well. The drivers will be working additional hours, running these double runs, triple runs, morning and afternoon. So they will likely be in overtime. Wanted to carry this example through with you with bus number 4 from the previous slide. So where that bus would traditionally run 3 runs, it would run its Myers Park, its Sharon Elementary, and a Carmel Middle School. That bus now may be running Sharon Elementary to Dilworth Elementaries, and then it's Carmel Middle School, arriving well later than that 4:15 bell time for them in the afternoon, likely well after 5 o'clock. Next slide, please. Some variables that we also want the board to consider for second semester. We recognize that the federal leave, this FFCRA, that was offered to all employees and those that applied and met the guidelines were granted that leave. That does expire on December 31st of this year, but we do know that it is possible that it could be extended next year. We just don't know. Currently, we have 67 of those drivers that are on this FFCRA. There are potential changes to the students that may move back from full remote academy to in-person learning for second semester. Please remember that any increase of those numbers from full remote academy to in-person learning would equate to most likely additional bus runs, which equates to additional bus routes for buses and then drivers. And then, of course, we want you to remember there could be any changes to the governor's order regarding the maximum bus capacity. Certainly, he could increase that, which would help, but he also could roll some of that back, especially at our elementary levels, which would create an impact for us negatively because we would have to reduce the number of students that we would transport. Next slide, please. We wanted to leave you with a lot of the ideas that we've explored. We want not only the board, but the public to know that this has been something we've worked on since May. When we thought in May we were coming back to school, and then we realized that we weren't coming back to school, we were already in planning mode. What we could do to make sure that we could meet the needs of opening school in August. When it looked like we weren't opening school in August, we made the next move to how can we get ready for whatever the phased approach or phased return plan would be. So please know, board members, public, that we have been working on this project all along the way. We're looking for ways to bring students back to school, but we also have to be realistic and know the challenges that we face, and that the drivers are on approved leave, so we can't bring them back to work until their approved leave expires. So what are some options that we looked at? Well, thought about maybe shifting the middle school bell times. Currently, we know that most of them are the last tier of the day. They're on that 9:15 to 4:15 tier. We do have some in the middle of the day. We have some at 8 or 8:15, 8:30, 9 o'clock. But if we would do a wholesale shift of making them the first tier in the morning, what would that look like? Well, students would be picked up most likely 2 hours earlier in most cases. It would require a change to the high school exam schedule. That's coming up real quick in December because we wouldn't be able to accommodate transporting those students to school for their exams. It would also require a change back for second semester. In just a few weeks, we would turn around and flip those families right back to their original tier to accommodate bringing the high school students back. We didn't think that that was fair to students and families to switch them around that quickly in such a big swing in time. So we put that to the side. We looked at another tier, another bell tier, and we actually looked at this way back in June as well. We have 9 bell tiers in Mecklenburg County. Again, just for the public as well as the board members, we are the largest transportation district in the state of North Carolina. We are the 8th largest transportation operation in the country. So we're proud of that fact, and we do a lot with what we have, but we also recognize there are limitations to what we do. Adding a 10th bell tier to a day that already is quite long, looking at a 9:45 to 4:45, we just thought, gee, what a long day for students and for staff and for families. So we would look at kids being picked up late in the morning, probably without a parent there, getting home after dark in the evenings, and just didn't think that was the right thing to do. Not only thinking about overtime for bus drivers, it's certainly a budget implication. And again, it does reduce the amount of time that we're able to perform maintenance on our buses on a daily basis. So we kind of put that to the side. And then we looked at consolidated or shuttle stops. While this was looked at several years ago in the district, and some of the schools did participate in the shuttle stop program, it does not adequately address the gap in the vacancies that we currently have. But most importantly, the timing to do such a project is typically a 3-month period of time to do this thoughtfully and intentionally. We would be compressing that down into less than 3 weeks to get this together, identify schools, identify the parents that would be interested. It's so much work to compress into such a small period of time that it wouldn't be, that the payoff really wouldn't be there to do this, to try to open schools by November 23rd. So those are some of the things that we've looked at, we've explored as this potential, the shortage did present itself, and also wanted to identify that this is something that really has ramped up over the past few weeks. This isn't something we knew about in August or September, and we just kind of sat around and didn't think about it. As the different return of students happened, we had our exceptional students return at the end of September. We had our pre-K students returning October the 12th. Each of those return dates, and we watched the trends in the leave rates of people that applied for this federal leave and were approved, continue to ramp up, such that by the end of October, we saw the trend was going in the wrong direction, and that it was operationally going to be impossible to do what we need to do for families and students, and also meet those guidelines that the state has put forth for the health and safety of students, and not exceeding that maximum of 24 students per bus. So we had to send up the red flags and let our cabinet staff know, and of course, board members were letting you know this tonight. And of course, Superintendent Winston will move through what the recommendation would possibly be. But I'm happy that you were able to take the time to listen to this information, and I'll be here certainly to answer whatever questions I have. And with that, I will turn it back over to Dr. Hayes.
Thank you, Adam. We appreciate that. I will share with you at this point in time, just to, before I pass this over to Superintendent Winston to make a recommendation, is we also have a couple of action steps that will be taking place for second semester that will begin on November the 16th through November the 30th of this month, in which this timeline for second semester's decision has been accelerated. Especially around the notification of being in full remote or being in person. This is due to needing to be able to create accurate bus routes for our students that will be with us in person. So that is why that has been accelerated, and the new deadline for that is November the 30th. Families should continue alerting their schools if they intend to change their students in person or full remote assignment for second semester, just as they have We had a wonderful conversation with our principals today that many of them were clearly articulating very smooth transition plans that they had for those students and how they were capturing those individuals needing to transition out of full remote into in-person or from in-person to full remote. So we greatly appreciate our strong leaders out there. Families with students attending in-person for second semester should also respond to a transportation survey by the end of the day, Monday, November the 30th. So I'm going to say that again because that will launch on November the 16th. We're going to use the remainder of this week to make sure that we stage everything and we stage our communication effectively to our schools and to our community, so that once again, that survey for transportation will launch on November the 16th and it will close on November the 30th. But families with students attending in person for second semester should also respond to a transportation survey again by the end of the day, Monday, November the 30th, and that survey will launch this Monday, the 16th. Students for whom the survey is not completed will default to their first semester attendance assignment, and if attending in person and eligible for transportation, will be included on the CMS bus route. So once again, if you do nothing at all, you will default back to your current status with the in-person or for remote, and if you're in person, you will be assigned a bus route at that point in time. So at this time, I'm going to pass it over to Superintendent Winston to make a recommendation.
So Superintendent Winston can find his mute button. Thank you, Dr. Hayes and Ms. Francisco, Mr. Johnson, thank you all very much. I do want to note, because I know that board members and members of our listening public heard several times the acronym FFCRA. That stands for Families First Coronavirus Response Act. So that is directly, that leave is directly related to the pandemic. Now, as it relates to the recommendation for middle school return to in-person, the recommendation is specifically this, that we return our students in grades 6 through 8 who attend K-8 schools on November the 30th on the K-5 rotation schedule. And you know, for our K-5 students, they're broken into Group A, Group B. Group A attends Monday, Tuesday. Group B attends Thursday, Friday, with Wednesday being a remote learning day. The other part of the recommendation is that we return all remaining students in grades 6 through 12 on January the 5th on an ABC weekly rotation, which aligns with our high school calendar. All 6th through 8 middle school and high school teachers who were not previously approved for remote work would return, if this recommendation is approved by the board, they would return on November 30th in preparation for end of course testing. Also, I think it's worth noting, very important, that our high-risk remote approvals for licensed school-based staff will be reevaluated for potential extension beyond December 31st. Now, the rationale behind the recommendation that I am making to our board tonight is because for the health and safety of our students, and in order to remain in compliance with Governor Cooper's executive order, we believe we can safely transport our 6 through 8 component of our K-8 schools, which would give us the ability to place no more than 24 students on a bus. And so I know a question might be, well, how can you do that? Well, when the routes were designed, our K-8 school bus routes were designed to meet the threshold of having 24 students per bus. And so, Madam Chair, board members, this is the recommendation, and that concludes our report for this evening, and we'll be happy to entertain any questions that board members may have.
Okay, and before I turn to board members for questions, I'm just going to kind of put that into plain English, if I may. So what this recommendation says is that if your kids go to a K-8 and you have middle schoolers going to a K-8, the recommendation is for them to go back to school on November 30th, which is a week later than you were expecting. And they are going to go on the same schedule as the elementary kids in that K-8. So if you have siblings, they'll all be, they'll be on the same schedules. And that's going to help the schools out too, because they've got, that helps them with their scheduling. So you're not juggling multiple schedules for different grade ranges within one school. Now, if you are in a regular traditional 6 through 8 middle school, we cannot, because we've got so many bus drivers who have just in the last few weeks taken advantage of this federal leave that they have the right to take, and we can't say no. Because of all those bus drivers out on leave, we can't socially distance our middle schoolers on the bus. So we can get it done with the K through 8 middle schoolers, but not with the traditional 6 through 8 middle schoolers. So that's me trying to translate that into plain English, and I will turn to, I see Ms. De La Hara, and then Ms. Marshall, and then Dr. Jones, and then Ms. Shipp.
Okay, great. So just a couple questions here. I just want to confirm for the public, because I received some questions today asking why our current metrics show that we have busing available. And so can I just get a confirmation from someone from staff that reiterates that our current, this is my understanding, our current metrics show our availability for busing for what we're doing right now, which is servicing our elementary schools and some of our other school sites. But that does not reflect the number of buses and or bus drivers that will be needed on what was going to be our November 23rd return. Would that be a correct assessment?
Yes, that's exactly right, Ms. De La Hara.
Okay, thank you. I just want to reiterate that to the public because there's this kind of urgency I see where people feel like we're not being transparent. They're like, that doesn't make sense. It looks fine. And I just want to reiterate that those are the numbers that we're in our current situation. And Mr. Johnson here is presenting what he has come across, which is this new uptick in information. And can you also reiterate, I believe you said, Mr. Johnson, that you noticed this just a few weeks ago, that more of these leads started coming in. Is that correct?
Yes, ma'am, Mr. Lillard. What we noticed is as the phased return happened when we started our exceptional kids at the end of September, we saw a slight uptick. Then when the pre-K students came back October the 12th, we saw another uptick. And then it was the second to the last week of October, we saw the final kind of surge and almost doubled by that time. And by that time, it went from about 30 to over close to 70. And that was that many applications and approvals for the drivers for that, as Superintendent Winston pointed out, that federal leave FCRA that's specific to COVID. So that's when we noticed that trend was going in the wrong direction. So we had to, alert the cabinet staff to what this would actually be for the impact of students.
And I appreciate you noticing that and following that trend and alerting, as you should be doing, to notify staff leadership and then ultimately the board like you're doing. The reason that I'm asking you to reiterate that is, as I know there's this sense of out there, well, you guys have had since March to figure this out, and I'm afraid we're not fully communicating. So I want to over communicate this, that things change and things shift, and you've noticed this gradual increase and brought that to our attention. And it's my understanding that that's why we are where we are right now. And I just think it's good for the public to understand that things are changing and we're changing with it. You did also say in your comments that to relook at different routes sometimes could be months worth of work. and that we, couldn't possibly redo that, by the end of this month, condense it into 2 weeks, let's say 3-4 months worth of work into 2 weeks. And I apologize, I'm trying to paraphrase or remember what you say. You can certainly clarify. I guess my next question would be, though, we know that many of these particular leaves run out in the end of December, and we aren't sure if there will be extensions or not, but will we have time between now and the end of December to look at other options, whatever that may be? And if you can explain more about what that'll be, I just think it'll be good for the public to have an idea of, now that we are aware of this, what can we do to be even that much more proactive about not finding ourselves in this position again come January?
Absolutely. Great questions. What I want to back up to, though, is even when we knew in August that we weren't going back on the 17th, once we found out the list of those students that were going into full remote academy, we were able to immediately work with our IT department to deassign those students to really tighten up and run as efficiently as possible. As Ms. Francisco pointed out when she opened our presentation, we would start our traditional year with 1,088 buses. But because we went ahead and set all of those students to the side, close to 50,000 plus, that gave us the ability to reduce from 1,088 down to that 1,005. So if the public can kind of think about it like that, there's 83 buses immediately we took off the road, put those to the side to run as efficiently as possible. To answer your second question about the timing to kind of get those routes together, that was specific more to those shuttle stops and creating the consolidated stop / shuttle stop plan. That takes a lot of planning, coordination with schools, families, and that's something that would take a significant amount of time. If we're working through the survey that the district is putting out, that will give us a better sense of the students that will be coming back to us from full remote academy, as well as parents that will opt out of transportation, perhaps, we think, between that time, between now and second semester. We will be able to make use of these next several weeks to, again, pare down even further what we have currently at this 1,005. If we do see a significant trend of those that are in-person learning now, they might move over to full remote academy, or we might have people that are in-person learning and just say, you know what, I'm good, I can transport my own kids to school. That will give us more information and help us better prepare. So if we get that information by the end of November, we're going to do all that work within those few weeks to really just deassign more stops, deassign those students, repair the bus runs to make them more efficient, and we hope to consolidate to the point that we're able to reduce the fleet even further.
Thank you. One quick follow-up question. When is that survey going out? You mentioned the survey to the parents.
Dr.
When
Hayes?
is that scheduled?
Yes, ma'am. So that survey is going out on the 16th on Monday. We're going to use the remainder of this week to make sure that we get the communication right, make sure we get any translations that need to be done, because it's going to be a critical survey that we need to get accurate information back on. We'll make sure that we take the time to get it right. But that will launch on Monday, and it will run through the 16th through the 30th of November. We will close it on November the 30th, and then pull that data from there and place it in for Adam and his team to be able to do what they need to do to build those routes.
Great, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Okay, Ms. Marshall?
Thank you all. Adam, I want to address some questions here, and in some ways to go a little bit deeper with a line that Ms. De La Hara opened for us. So I have also been helping and experiencing the intake of students in the mornings at schools, and it's quite an honor to walk a kindergartner into their first day of school. That's really a neat thing. But I have noticed, and I understand that last week, certainly being the first week of school, we certainly have high ridership, but we all anticipated that we would have, car ridership, that we would have continued increased car ridership this year. I think that is a trend that our neighboring districts have had. We will continue to have. So we have excess capacity, in my opinion, and I think everybody agrees with that. We have schools, certainly in my area, that have very few students riding the bus. So right now we have excess capacity. And so I know that it is normal that you are taking routes even in the best of times and readjusting those as we go along. And I think what we see here is a short-term and a long-term problem. And they both take some time to fix. I would love to figure out if we could do some things in the short term very quickly to use some of that excess capacity that we have in some areas to certainly help areas where we have much higher anticipated ridership. So I want you to speak to that. And the other thing I think we ought to always to keep in mind, and I just want to have an understanding as someone, you may have this information or not, by state statute, when we offer transportation, we have to offer that to every student in the district. And so it looks to me that we have assigned a bus stop, an actual stop to every student in the district. And that's kind of why we are right now in terms of spreading our assets very widely when we know we don't really need that to do that this year. So is that normal that we always that we don't survey folks to ask them and we just assume people may go in and out of bus transportation? And because of that, that sort of brought us to this situation right now where we've spread these resources very widely and now we're trying to narrow them. So I should have gone there first and then ask you the question about narrowing our resources and using those where we know we need them. And how could we do that in the short term?
Okay, Ms. Marshall, you're going to work me because I think I got four questions out of that. Well, let me see if I can get them down here for you. All right, so your first question was about carpool line, car riders. Absolutely on point. We noticed that the first day of school when I was out at schools. Certainly saw that carpool line well beyond what it normally would be, but not too much of a difference from maybe a first day of school in a traditional year.
I understand.
What we normally do, Ms. Marshall, is in a traditional pre-COVID year, we give those first 10 days or the first 2 weeks of school still to allow parents to decide if the bus schedule will work for them, kind of let us get our groove back and get into what we know would be a routine schedule for parents and kids. So if you think about it, the cohort A really just finished their third rotation today, and then cohort B will start again on Thursday. So by next week, we would really start narrowing in on those stops that we don't have kids and start that consolidation process in preparation for what we anticipated to be a return, just in case we do have to go back, on the 23rd, we would be in that process next week to do that consolidation. The second question you had is the state statute offering service to every student. Absolutely right again, but those are only eligible students. So there's thousands of students within CMS that aren't eligible for transportation. Either they live outside of a local attendance boundary, could be a host of different reasons, or parents have already told us prior year that they don't need transportation, and we do deassign them. So while we have stops that we anticipate that families said they were going to ride, we know that a lot of times parents will hedge the bets. And even if we have done surveys in the past where we say, do you think you'll ride morning? Do you think you'll ride afternoon, or both? Sometimes parents will say, well, let's see, I might need them that one Friday afternoon I can't get to the school, or Monday mornings are just kind of crazy for me, so I might need the bus. So typically they'll say to us they need a bus whether they do or really don't. And we understand that everybody's schedule is different, and we certainly want kids to ride the bus. It's the safest way to get kids to and from school. But what my point is that while state statute says, yeah, we do have to offer transportation to every student, just to your point, once we know that we can do some consolidation and we see students aren't riding, we can do that work in the background to eliminate some of those stops and then, and what you would say, compress some things together. But what I want to point out there is because so many of our elementary runs, we have 9 different bell tiers, starting at our high school, is 7:15 to 2:15, all the way in the middle. There are 7 other tiers that kind of make that middle part, and the bookend is that 9:15, 4:15 tier. So as we try to move and shake with all those things and kind of compress those runs together, what's going to end up happening is we still won't have the ability to have those middle school slots open to transport middle school kids. And because we're limited by the governor's order with 24 students per bus, that really does preclude us from doing anything more on those middle school buses to be able to transport those kids. So then the third question you asked was about spreading our resources around. And you're right, because we are where we are now, because we were able to remove the full remote students, that 50,000 plus, and that did help us tremendously. I don't know how we would have been able to survive if we didn't reduce from 1088 down to 1005. But the way we're able to survive now, and kind of think about it like this, Ms. Marshall, we already have those 122 that we know that are out on leave. And then today, for example, we had about 30 drivers that called in, just a regular call-in sick. Their kid was sick, car wouldn't start, they had a doctor's appointment. So we had 30 on top of that, so we're 150. If you think about what we're doing just to do our K-5 students and bringing them to school every day, and we're doing pretty well, actually. Our on-time arrival is around 95%. We're able to do that because we're moving things around behind the scenes and covering where currently a middle school run would live, a bus that would be serving maybe a high school, elementary, and a middle. We're moving elementary runs around to put in those slots, and actually drivers that have a high school or a middle school run, they're not even driving, so we're moving those to fill those vacancies. So there's so many moving parts to make it happen, but to do all of that and then be able to open on the 23rd successfully just is not operationally possible, unfortunately.
Okay. I've got a couple other questions in terms of problem solving for this, but I think we're probably going to be having several rounds. I'm not going to occupy all your time. I'm going to come back to you in a minute, so I'll let my colleagues go with some others.
Okay, I've got Dr. Jones, then Ms. Shipp, and then Ms. Cheek, and then Mr. Schul. You need to unmute, Dr. Jones. There.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, ma'am.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Johnson. I realize that the reality of a district this size, depending on buses to transport a large number of our students. However, in the best of times, I have heard parents of the smaller children, the grades kindergarten and first, they are very wary of their children being transported with a grade 6 through 8. Particularly, I had asked previously about bus monitors, and that didn't seem to be something that you all had considered. But have you looked at the efficacy and just the whole safety issue of students in that wider grade span, riding the same bus, grades kindergarten through middle school, 8th grade?
Yes, ma'am, Dr. Jones. I don't know that any study or real deep look has been taken to about safety on K-8 buses. I can tell you that our K-8 buses are typically, even pre-COVID and in this situation we're in now, are the ones that do not have the high numbers of students assigned to them. And the other good news there is, because they fall into that middle school range, they are limited to 24 students per bus. So you would have 1 student per seat on those buses. So that should help, we would believe, with safety and with behavior on those buses. But our drivers are really in tune with what's going on now because the heightened awareness of just everything in their workspace. So we know that they are watching things very closely. But I don't know of anything specific that's been done with safety or monitors on those pre-K or K-8 buses.
Okay, thanks.
Yes, ma'am.
So me next. Am I going next?
I hear you.
Okay. Thank you so much, Mr. Johnson, for a lot of this information, which I know a lot about transportation, having worked with it in schools. So one of my questions would be, and I thank you for all your work, is as we begin to look at them coming back, for example, I know the K-8 students have always ridden together. So like you're saying, they did that in the past and also had the same schedule. So I'm really glad we're changing that schedule because that was a big concern that those schedules wouldn't be the same. So I'm glad to see that that was very important. The other question I had though is as we begin to look at what we can do for all students, have we looked at, and I know shuttle stops, I was around doing the shuttle stops, and I know that's some work, but I've already had parents who would say, and I mean, even in my community, different communities saying that, they would look at that again if that were possible. And I know that takes work, but that was something, and especially with parents wanting kids to, those really want them to come back. So I don't know I know we don't have time for that now, but I wonder if that was something you're gonna look at in terms of the shuttle stops again. It was a lot, but many of them were willing to do it. And I think they really would be willing to do that maybe now.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Shipp, right on point. I think anything's on the table second semester when we get back looking at so for us, Ms. Shipp, we would start our preparation for the 21-22 year in March of 21. So I think that's definitely a possibility, and I'm happy to do whatever is best for the kids, and it's going to be most efficient for us. So it's definitely a possibility. Yes, ma'am.
Right. And so in terms of drivers, and someone's asked me this question, drivers have leave. Explain that teachers don't, because teachers were saying with drivers were able to take those leave. And is that because they're non-exempt in terms of employees and they had that additional leave time through the CARES Act? Because teachers were saying that they were asked to come back, for example, even though they had doctor's notes and those kind of things. But I think that's a different category of staff when you talk about non-exempt versus the licensed staff. Is that true? Who would speak to that?
So Ms. Shipp, so certainly Mr. Johnson can speak to that, but we also have Ms. Rogers available to talk specifics about leave and the more general employee population.
Right, because I had someone ask me that question, bus drivers leave versus, and we want to make sure they know that they have those opportunities, but it's a difference in the leave, is it not?
Yes, so let's get an explanation from Ms. Rogers, thanks.
Yes, thank you. So I think what that question may be with regard to is the emergency leave that's available for the non-exempt population. And so those who fall into the non-exempt population, bus drivers, cafeteria workers, et cetera, those individuals were eligible for up to 80 hours of emergency leave that they could take advantage of. In addition to the emergency leave, we still have the FFCRA leave that you've heard reference to, which is the Family First Coronavirus Response Act, that all employees, as long as they meet the criteria, are eligible to take advantage of, as long as it falls under one of the criteria and they meet the qualifications.
Thank you so much for that. And I think it was good clarification for the staff and, teachers and the public to understand that leave.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Ms. Cheek and then Mr. Schewel. And I'm sorry if I'm getting the order wrong in where people raised hands, but I'm doing my best here tonight.
That's okay. I think everybody gets brain fatigue after a long day and a lot of time online. I know I do. Our teachers do, and I know our staff does. How do I say this? This is such a disappointing presentation. Love all you guys so much and appreciate all your hard work, but it's just a disappointment. I'm getting bombarded by parents that are begging us to let their kids come back, their middle school kids. And yes, I'm well aware of the metrics and the virus and the what is going on with that. I'm also well aware that the governor, contracted the number of people for in-person gatherings from 25 to 10, but he said that he wasn't going to change anything with schools. And it was said today at one of the press conferences that schools are not a place of transmission. And like we said earlier, we're not seeing the spread in the schools. We're seeing people come to school positive, probably because of things they did on the weekend with small groups or social gatherings. That said, maybe Ms. Marshall asked this and I just missed it, but had we thought to survey parents maybe in August to see what their ridership would be. So by the time we did start back with our kids in the last few weeks, we would have already known and been ahead of the game. I'm hearing anecdotally about one kid on a bus where there's usually 10 at a bus stop. I'm also hearing from parents that are saying that my child was assigned a bus and he hasn't ridden the bus for 3 years. And so they're questioning why were they assigned a bus, where in the past, I think they've had a card that the school gave them and they filled it out and they said, I won't need a bus next year. And it seems that perhaps in all of the COVID chaos over the summer, we neglected to do that. So can you, I mean, that would be my first question. So did we forget to do that? And did we think before this week that we might need to survey and find out how many people were going to ride our buses?
So good question, Ms. Cheek. From my 2 years being back here in the district, I'm not aware of a survey that's been done to check with parents to see if they'll ride the bus or not. What we typically rely on is our drivers to turn in what updated route descriptions that they can cross off students that have not been riding the bus, or potentially add students that we just didn't know about, and we add those into the roster. So I wasn't aware of anything that's been done prior to me being here. And if somebody has been left on a bus over the summer, it's either because the driver may not have taken that student off, maybe they rode just one time. It's hard to say. But moving forward into your second part of your question of did we survey parents in August to decide if they were going to ride? The answer is no. I don't know whether that was something even at that point we felt was necessary, because at that time we were staffed and ready to roll. So whatever was going to be, we were ready to roll on the 17th of August. We would have been ready to roll again the 17th of September, whatever day that would have fallen on. What we weren't ready for is once that leave was offered to employees and that federal leave was taken, and rightfully so, those that have situations, whether it's medical, personal, family related, we weren't ready for that when it really ramped up within the last 2 weeks. And there was no way for us to properly prepare at that point, because we didn't know that we couldn't have anticipated that was coming. So I don't even know whether we surveyed in August if it would have been necessary, because we were ready to roll given the current circumstances all the way up until so many people had gone out on leave. And that happens in a regular school year, but in this COVID situation that we're in, it was just amplified probably times 3.
Yeah, I want us to try to get a real good handle on the number of kids that are going to be riding a bus, because we may think that leave expires December 31st, but something's going to happen and we can't not start on January 5th. I'm tempering my emotions so much right now, because they haven't been very tempered up until this point over this situation. It's pissing me off. I mean, and there you go. And I'm sure I'll get hate on Twitter from that, but I hate that we are in a place where we're supposed to be. I had a parent, this is where I am. I had a parent say to me today, if we weren't in COVID, if we didn't have COVID going on, but we had a shortage of bus drivers, we would never have had the ability or the statutes, and the state, the state would not have just let us say, we're just not going to open school because we don't have enough bus drivers. And that's kind of what we're doing now. It is COVID related, but it's not. It's a struggle, and parents are not reacting very well to it. I mean, the parents that don't want us to go back, they're fine. But the parents that were kind of counting on this, that the kids, I'm hearing about kids and their mental health being so challenged right now, and so many other things that are just very scary. So we've got to get this right. I'm not going to vote for this tonight. It'll still pass, but I can't vote for it. But we can't not get this right when it's time. You can't come back to me in December and tell me you still can't get enough bus drivers to start on January 5th. We can't do that to our community. We're letting down our kids right now. And that is, to me, and I think you know that. I think Matt Hayes, I think all of them know that, but I feel awful. And I'm going to say I am sorry to the middle school parents out there and to the middle school children. I'm sorry about the mental health issues that parents are just blasting my email with about their kids. I'm sorry. And we are letting them down, and I'm so sorry. And that's really all I have to say.
Well, Ms. Cheek, if I could just thank you for sharing your thoughts on that. And I understand and feel the frustration that exists. We're frustrated as well. We would not have liked to have come tonight with this recommendation, but this is an evolving situation and circumstances are changing daily, constantly. And, you know, I don't want it to go that we're letting our kids down. I think we are here because of the actual circumstances. We're not, this is nothing that we're doing intentionally, but it's a matter of circumstances. And I will tell you that, you know, and I know it's disappointing for you to have to consider the recommendation to move back or just delay bringing middle school students back. We're not here because we want to be here. We're here because we have to, and we think the prudent thing to do is to make the recommendation to the board that we've made. Now, I know you mentioned that you probably wouldn't vote for the recommendation. The option does exist to also continue with the return to in-person learning plan for middle school students. There are trade-offs there. And I think Mr. Johnson kind of outlined some of the trade-offs from a safety and timing perspective. But, you know, I hear your frustration, but we're not here.
Well, and Superintendent Winston, let me also add that is why it's critical when we launch on the 16th, that survey, that we are shouting to our families across our community that if they have the availability to take their children, I know that for a fact, my wife and I both will check mark that we will provide transportation for both of our children in high school and middle school when they're given that opportunity to transport them to school, to free up the opportunity for someone that may not have that flexibility. So I just want to make sure that when that goes out on the 16th to all of our families, to all of our board members, please, please, please push out there for our families to complete that so we get an accurate number, complete whether they're going to go into full remote, whether they're going to go into in-person. The timeliness of that is critical by November the 30th because our transportation team, it's going to take them a minimum of 3 weeks to turn that around, and we want to give them that opportunity to get it right. So just want to put a little plug in for that as well. So thank you.
I'll definitely promote that and definitely think that's great. It's just not going to help us get kids back in November.
Okay, Mr. Schul and then Ms. Sawyer.
Yeah, so I have a few questions. First, I just wanted to say as a point of reflection for this board that this vote seems to me just a vote of alternatives, right? Like this obviously isn't an option that anyone would want, but if the alternative is making kids come back home at 7 after dark, then it just seems pretty intuitive that this is what we have to do. So then first, I was wondering, and this seemed like something that I wasn't sure if it needed to be a big concern in the presentation, but what's the impact of this like crunching maintenance times? Is that a safety concern? What does that do for our buses?
Yes, sir. So we have in our fleet 1,005 buses currently that'll be running daily, and our fuel truck drivers have to fuel all of those buses daily. We have routine maintenance that has to be done. So when the bus drivers come back and park, not only are we disinfecting buses now every day that we park, whether that's 9:30, 9:45, and what we're concerned about is as that window of time shrinks, if buses are out longer, running double runs, triple runs, not getting back to the bus lot till 10 or 10:15, it just shrinks that period of time that the technicians will have to work on the buses, the fuel truck drivers have to fuel the buses, the drivers themselves have to clean and disinfect the buses, and then turn the buses right back around after 1:30 and get ready to roll for an afternoon run.
Okay, so that seems pretty cyclical at that point if we're not able to clean the buses as well. So then the second question is about the leave policy, because when the FFCRA was originally passed, it passed with pretty strong bipartisan support. And so I'm wondering what kind of decision making or thought have we put into the possibility of that leave being extended, because that still is a legal possibility. And, if that is extended, then that puts us in a real time crunch between like the beginning of the year and January 5th. So what is the situation if that leave decides to be extended?
Well,
Go ahead.
I'm sorry, go ahead, Adam.
All right. Well, I can answer for my part, Gabe, for transportation. What we've talked about with the survey of really digging in to get good information will help us to prepare for a return in January. Please know, and the viewing public watching out there, board members, we want to bring kids back. Our driver's livelihood depends on us being at work. So I have a dedicated group of drivers and transportation team that want nothing more to roll. That's what we do. And if that's the will of the board, that we even roll on the 23rd of November, we're going to do it because that's what we're here to do, to serve kids and families. But we also just have to also be a responsible person to say, this is the situation we're facing and kind of bring that information forward. But if we can have that time to gather more data from intent to ride, parents opting out of riding, or more people going perhaps to full remote academy, we can again consolidate, condense, and reduce more buses or take more buses off the road, which will help us identify and hopefully bridge that gap and fill whatever vacancies we have. In the meantime, we're doing job fairs, we're recruiting more drivers as much as we can, and hopefully by that time, we'll still be able to fill more positions by that return time in January.
Ms. Rogers, did you want to speak to the odds of the federal leave act?
Yeah, thank you. In terms of the federal leave, right now it has a scheduled end date, which is December 31st this year. However, if the government decides to extend the FFCRA leave, it will be made available to employees. So that it's fluid. So it could be the case that employees may take advantage of that, and that could potentially impact us in January as well.
Okay, so yeah, there's a chance that we're back at the drawing board in a few months. So then also, I think one thing that kind of was striking also about the recommendation, and this is a more general level, is that when we originally proposed a plan for return to in-person instruction, we proposed it with a phase, right? With the 3 weeks in between each phase between elementary, middle, and high school. And the rationale was that way we can revise policies that may have not worked so well. And obviously that's helpful, because when the EC students came back, we noticed an uptick in workers applying for leave. So there was obviously a difference in policies that came within that phase. So I'm wondering, like, what is the rationale for doing away with the phase between middle school and high school?
So Gabe, let me, go ahead.
Go ahead, Matt.
Go ahead. No, you're fine. Go ahead, sir. You trump me. You're the superintendent, sir. I will yield to you.
Well, obviously you understood the question better than I did. I was going to ask for clarification, but you go right ahead.
No, I think, Gabe, what you're referring to is that before we had a 3-week process in which to prepare and get everything taken care of and gradually bring students in. Where in this situation, what we're doing, we will still have that opportunity to prep our schools and so forth for the students to come in. We still will be gaining that 3 weeks, but that 3 weeks actually will be at the same time in which we have high schoolers come in. So we will do an intensive focus where before we had that, we will be using the data and the information that we're gathering from our 6-8 of our K-8s coming in to help inform us to continue to add students and prepare to receive students in the middle and high school once they return at the beginning of second semester in January.
Yeah, I guess my concern is that, there's going to be a point where the week before January 5th, or the week after January 5th, I'm sorry, we're going to have a dashboard that all of a sudden doesn't just represent K through 5, but represents also 6th through 12, right? Which I think is pretty intimidating. So I think, we have to be especially cautious. And that's why I think that it does make sense to have a phase, or at least some sort of period, to look at what policies are changing between coming into middle school and coming into high school. But that's all I'll say.
Thank you, Gabe.
Okay, Ms. Sawyer and then Ms. Byers-Bailey. You're muted.
Mr. Johnson, I would really like to thank you and your team for running countless alternatives and thinking outside the box and playing a three-dimensional chess game, on a rocky shore, a rocking boat. I mean, it's just, you've got everything moving all around you and lots of moving pieces. And I just appreciate all the work that you and your team and your drivers are doing for us. My question is actually for Dr. Hayes. Will families get an actual survey about opting into full remote academy? Are they just supposed to email the principal? What is the form that they should respond to?
Yes, ma'am. Thank you. So the full remote academy has always rested with the schoolhouse itself because it's not we're not transferring students to a different setting. They're inside their schools. It's just a different mode in which they will be in to receive instruction, modality that they're receiving instruction. So many of our elementary schools, middle and highs that are doing that have already set up processes. Those are already on the way. What they need to do, the only thing that's going to change for them is that instead of the December the 4th deadline that we had in place, we're going to have to pull that back to November the 30th. We just need that extra week to make sure that Adam and his team have adequate time to build those routes. So when we come back on the first day of second semester, we'll be able to execute on those. But they just need to work directly with our schools. Many of the schools have already articulated to us that they've got great processes in place. Students are responding to those things. If we have some individuals that are struggling with that in any way, they are more than welcome to reach out to the school themselves to make sure that they know clearly what that process is without a doubt.
Okay, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Ms. Byers-Bailey?
Thank you. I've been listening to the questions and the presentation, and I just felt I needed to put my 2 cents in here in that I'm really grateful that my K-8 students are going to, my 6/8s and the K-8s are going to be able to come back to school. A lot of those students are in Title I schools. A lot of those students have had challenges with the remote learning. They've had challenges with connectivity, and they really were struggling. But I know that some of the parents are still concerned. The students need to get back in school, or the parents are concerned about the health and safety of their children. And so they're torn. And all I can say to those parents is, if you are that afraid that your child is at risk, now is the time to fill out that survey and opt into the full remote academy. Then you won't have to, your child will be done with it. They will have this few weeks in if you couldn't get out of it, but then they can go in full remote academy for second semester. It's important that you make a choice. Don't just sit there on your hands and let the system make the choice for you. You decide where you want your child to be. I've heard some suggestions about shuttle stops. Please don't do shuttle stops. That was the disaster for so many families who could not make the arrangements to get to those locations and didn't have the time to sit there and wait for the shuttle bus. That was why we got rid of it. We do not want to go back and make that mistake a second time. And so that's what all I have to say about it. The other thing, I guess, we are consolidating the full middle schools and the high schools together because the parents and the students need to get in school. We don't have the luxury of waiting another 3 weeks and then another 3 weeks and then another 3 weeks. We've got to get this done. Thank you.
Okay, I'll coming back to you, Ms. Marshall.
Thank you. So we've just, there are a lot of issues here. Certainly, I'm also hearing from parents, and I have been, and on a personal note, I've really wanted this. Been so looking forward to welcoming our middle school students back. I know our staff has been, and this is and this is a disappointment. That's really that's the word we can use, because I think it's certainly the direction that everybody on this board has been hoping to take, and our staff as well. So we've got some short-term and long-term problems to solve. So can you speak to me about other things that you've done in and outside the box? We're thinking about CATS and our folks and our partners across the city that have the ability to drive buses. Can you speak to what you've done and what might be the possibilities to pull some of those folks back in to help us out on a short-term basis?
Yes, ma'am. A couple of things with that. CATS drivers, while they do hold a CDL, a commercial driver's license to drive their bus, they have a P endorsement, which would just provide them to transport passengers. School bus drivers have a S restriction on their commercial license that allows them to operate a school bus. In the state of North Carolina, that's DMV regulations. So we do have some school bus drivers, they're typically substitute drivers. They may start with us, work for a while, and then they'll move on to CATS because CATS drivers make more money per hour than our school bus drivers do. But we do have some that will come back and substitute some routes for us, maybe one morning, an afternoon, or if they have a day off. So we can rely on that on a substitute basis, an unfortunate way. But spoke to my counterpart at CATS today. They are actively recruiting their own drivers. They need drivers as well. So there's not the opportunity for them to loan any drivers to us, because beyond that, a regular CATS driver couldn't just come unless they were also an employee of Charlotte-Mecklenburg Schools. So those drivers that are driving a CATS bus currently that do substitute for us, we can potentially count on some of those folks, but we couldn't just pull a random CATS driver and apply them to a Charlotte-Mecklenburg school bus. It wouldn't happen in an immediate process that would identify the problem to put them in by November 23rd. They would have to go through the training class just like a regular person off the street to go get their S restriction on their license.
How long does it take, sort of from the beginning of the process to the end of the process, to train new drivers? And
So,
to the public, we need you. We want you on Team CMS. So how long does
absolutely.
that take?
So yeah, what we kind of could share with the public also is a couple of important facts. Because of the restrictions that DMV has put on that CDL process, once they go through the initial screening process through our human resources department, a driver would be invited to a bus class. Class work is 3 days. Then they're going through a 14-day period of training with us, but they have to get their permit, their CDL permit. So that's a new procedure and policy that's in place. To answer your question, rather than get all the way down the road with all the details, Ms. Marshall, it actually turned out to be a little over 8-week process from start to finish. So the old days, back when I got my CDL when I was 19, way back when, I say way back when, 1995, 96, it was a 3-day class. I went out 3 days of driving and I got my CDL. I was behind the wheel of a bus the next day. So it was about a week process and you were out there hauling kids. It's a longer process now, and it actually takes, drug testing, background checks, the training process, the time to now, and the DMV process is actually longer because DMV is a lot slower because of COVID. So that process is only lengthened. So it is about an 8-week process, a little over 2 months from the time we would see a driver in a bus class, so we can actually put them behind the wheel of a bus driving CMS kids.
Okay. I think that this just paints a picture of a probably a very long-term issue that we're thinking about. So I'm going to appeal to the public as well. If you think that you can take your child to school, we need you to do that this year. This is not environmentally friendly. It is not traffic friendly, but it is going to be the way we make this happen. So that is what we're going to have to do. And I want to ask this question of Dr. Hayes. If we find out during this survey period, where I know you guys are going to be crunching the numbers and working on this hard, that we have some possibilities in terms of openings in bus drivers openings and routes after we consolidate these buses, and some potential openings in schools, could we do some things with our rotations? Have our students come more frequently, would we still be stuck on that 1 week on, 2 week off rotation for these 6-8 and then K-12? I mean, 9-12.
Yes, ma'am. So I appreciate that question. We definitely could. I want to be clear in that every time we come to one of these board meetings, in between each of these meetings, in between every change that we're having to look at, there is multiple conversations that's happening outside of these, which is really kind of pulling in our principals, talking to them, looking at the numbers, and making sure that we can provide the safety and the quality that's needed for our students, not only to arrive at our schools, but also to receive that quality education. So no, we definitely will. That's why it's critical that we get those numbers in as soon as possible, because as soon as we have those, that allows not only for Adam's team to begin to look at creating the routes, it also allows for our school teams to really sit down and start looking at who they have and how many students they have in their building, and can they maintain that 6-foot social distancing, because until the governor removes that restriction from us, we have to adhere to that in our middle and our high schools.
Sure.
And that's the barrier, right? And so if our full remote numbers go up and we're able to accommodate that and maintain that 6-foot distancing and move to that AA-BB rotation, we definitely would. That frequency is key to us, and it's key to our schoolhouse leaders and our principals and everyone else that's there. So if that's an opportunity that we could take advantage of, we definitely would.
Thank you.
Ms. Delahara and then Ms. Shipp.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just a couple more follow-up questions that came my way. Mr. Jeter explained to us, I guess at our last meeting a couple of weeks ago, about how we have not yet received waivers from the federal or state government for these for certain tests that our students will be given that last week of December. But keeping that in mind, will we be prepared with enough buses to bring those students in for those few classes where we have mandates on the testing?
Yes, ma'am. We are preparing for those right now. We sent surveys out, and we got not a tremendous amount of response back from parents and students, but enough to where we could build bus runs, and we will be able to get those students to school on time for testing. Yes, ma'am.
Okay. And then lastly, you mentioned recruiting, that you're always looking for pipelines, but I'm just wondering, or maybe it's just a suggestion, I don't know if there are any new opportunities because of COVID. I can only imagine that regular job fairs are not taking place because of the virus, but maybe there are different online and different groups that are coming together because of COVID to spread the word about job openings in the community. So I'm not sure what all work has been done to tap into new labor pools, but I would just encourage you to do that in whatever way we can to continue the outreach.
Yes, ma'am. Good point. In fact, we just partnered with the Latin American Coalition yesterday to get the word out there. So we're hopeful that will provide a good base for us to attract more and a diverse workforce. And we've also partnered with some churches locally to get information out. We just did a pretty good push on social media for letting drivers know about the next bus class. So you're absolutely right. Anything we can do to increase our pool of eligible drivers certainly is what we're going to try to do.
Thanks.
And please share those when you have flyers or things like that, share those with us on the board, where we have networks too, and we can push those out to our networks.
Thank you, ma'am.
Ms. Shipp.
Yeah, on that note, kind of following behind Ms. Delahara, because my question was too about the testing is the window, and that we're bringing the kids back. And I've heard a lot of concern already about that. We have to do it. We're going to have to bring them back. But bringing kids back on the day of a test, you have a 9th grader never been in the building before. I think we really need to look at this window for when they're going to come back. This is so critically important because testing is just so important for our kids. And if that's 20% or plus of their grade, I think it's important that they get back in school and be prepared for that test.
And Ms. Shipp, I'm sorry to interrupt, but I just want to keep the topic to the topic at hand.
Right, I'm asking about right. Well, I'm asking about transportation because now it's going to back up to the time window. We're changing the time window for them coming back and the high schoolers, are we not? So we're backing everybody up. So what is the time window to get kids back in to be prepared for testing? And I just think that's critical, because what's in the best interest of kids when we talk about a test, you know, and they're not walking in on the day of a test to become familiar with the school, familiar with the classroom, and maybe the teacher. So and that's a transportation issue if we're saying that we've changed the timeline for when we're gonna bring these students back in the building.
Yes, ma'am, Ms. Shipp. I'm not aware of a change for their testing date in December. We're still following along with what the district has set forth. And Dr. Hayes, if you want to speak to that, I know that we've not changed anything with their testing date. We're ready. We're building those bus runs now, Ms. Shipp. So we will be able to support bringing those kids in December for their testing. Dr. Hayes.
That is correct, Adam. Thank you. We've got state mandates there that we can't move on. We've had conversations with the state on that, but at this point in time, we must adhere to the state regulations. So thank you.
So, but are they coming back on the day of test, that week of testing, the day of testing? That was my question. In terms of the bus transportation, is still set up to bring them back the day of testing?
Yes, ma'am. Yes, ma'am. That's what.
I've had questions from parents that are concerned about that, and how that's working in terms of the buses too as well. And then I am really concerned about equal access to all of our children. I am glad that we'll be able to do the K-8, the 6-8s and the K-8. We have so many other schools with needs as well, and so that is hard to see those middle schoolers where parents are ready for them to come back not be able to come back. This is just tough. This is really hard.
Mr. Strain?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And, Ms. Shipp, of course, raises a great point. It's the reason, one of the many reasons, actually, we should be talking about accelerating the return to school, not delaying the return to school. That being said, Mr. Johnson, it's my recollection that CMS runs the most efficient K-12 transportation system in the state. Is that right? In a normal year?
I like to think so. Yes, sir. We do a lot with the resources we have. Yes, sir.
Yeah, I think we do. Right. So, and that makes a big difference in terms of how we receive funding, et cetera. And so this year is clearly unique, and we need to adjust and drive efficiency. So we talked a little bit this week. What is the average number of students that we're currently transporting on one of our 877 buses that are on the road?
We're actually going to start collecting that data next week, Mr. Strain. I mean, as a couple of the board members pointed out, ridership has not been high last week. I mean, we had the one day, we had the election, we were off Wednesday, cohort B rotated in for 2 days, and now we're into 2 full days for cohort A. But we will gather that information for next week. Drivers are doing counts for us.
Do we have anecdotal evidence, anything? I mean, I went to an elementary school this morning and watched 11 buses roll in. I mean, I know how many kids were on those buses.
Yeah, I would hazard to make a guess, Mr. Strain. It's not high right now. And to the point of several of the board members that said, hey, what are you going to do to, start working on that? That's our next plan. And as we would do in a traditional school year. And while we recognize that right now ridership isn't high because either one is early or two, parents don't feel safe putting their kids back on the bus, whichever of the two it may be, or a combination of both, as we can start to prepare next week, which we would typically do in a regular school year after a 2-week period, which it isn't really a full 2 weeks, but we're gonna have to do the best we can because we are under a time constraint. So we'll next week start making those adjustments to start consolidating some of those elementary runs. But I really don't want to make, you're absolutely right. Ridership is not high. I just don't know what that actual number would be.
Yeah, so, earlier there was a mention of alternatives. The alternative that you laid out was doubling up runs, for example, right? So if there's an average, as there was this morning, at least at the school that I was at, of fewer than 10 kids per bus, in a 72-seat bus. You wouldn't have to double it up to get to 20. You could just lengthen the run to get to 20, right?
Absolutely.
Or let's say you did it to 15 and you added 50% more kids, 50% more efficiency. So 15 kids on a 72-seat bus. If you did that, then you wouldn't require 877 buses, which we require now. You would save close to 300 buses if you increase the efficiency by 50%. So that's an alternative as well, right? So we, instead of saying to our middle school students, no, we can't figure out the logistics of getting you to school, we could work on the efficiency of the routes, which you do as a matter of course anyway, I know you do. And that's why we run such a tremendously efficient system here in CMS. And so in doing so, then wouldn't that free up the bus capacity that's required in order to make up for the bus driver shortage?
And not in all cases.
Let me interject for just a second, Adam. Mr. Strain, I think your question is on point. However, it's not as easy as a math formula. We absolutely need the information from our community and our families this year more than ever to know who is going to need a bus ride versus who would just like to. I mean, it's a very flexible system, right? We've always allowed students to ride on a Monday and a Wednesday and a Friday, or a Tuesday and a Thursday. And we're just not in that position right now. I want to remind the board and the viewing public again that one of the primary, and to Ms. Cheek's point earlier, as you all, many of you know, I led this department for 22 years. I'm very familiar with the complexities and the challenges. And there were years that we had shortages of drivers, almost the same percentage that we are facing today. The difference today is the compliance issue we have under the governor's order that we can only assign 24 students to a bus in the middle school and the high school levels. That is 1/3. If we had the flexibility, if we were not under those restrictions, Mr. Johnson and his team, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now that we are having. We would have the flexibility to be able to do those double backs, Mr. Strain, that you're talking about. And we would load those buses to 60 students for the middle school students and double back, and we would be able to make this work. Right now, we have compliance issues, and we're just not able to go outside of those guardrails. But I would encourage this community, give us, and I did the intent to ride surveys, Ms. Cheek, that you were talking about, did them for many years. The responses that we received from the parents, unfortunately, were very low. We didn't get very many responses. This time we need your response, because if we don't receive the response, the default will be that we will assign you a bus ride, and we're not able to balance this challenge that we have. I hope that makes sense, board members, and our public and our families. I can tell you as the leader of the transportation department, and knowing Mr. Johnson as well as I do because he has worked with me for many years, there is nothing more disappointing to us than not to be able to transport these children to school starting November the 23rd. It is not what we want to do either. But we need everyone's input here and working together to close this gap to the extent that we can. And I really want our drivers, our bus drivers and other employees to hear clearly that this is not a fault or a blame on you either for taking a leave that you have the right to take. You have situations within your families, I suppose, that is leading you to those choices. So we're okay with that. And we're going to have to work together to fill the gap. And I'm sorry if I sound passionate, just as Ms. Cheek did earlier, but this is hard times, very hard decisions. And we are trying to make it work.
Thank you, Ms. Stamper. I'm trying to make it work as well. And so what I need to know is I need to know how many buses would need to be on the road, given the current restrictions, to put all of our elementary schools back, our middle schools back, and our high schools back, because that's what we're going to have to solve for January 5th. And we should be solving for that minus the high schools for November 23rd. So if we went back as planned, in fact, as our current board approved calendar says, on November 23rd, how many buses would we need?
We would need 1,005 buses.
Okay,
The
so we're
problem is
short
we don't have
128.
1,005 drivers.
So we're short 128, right?
Yes,
We've got 877. It is a math problem at that point, right? So we're short 128. And the discussion we were just having is about driving efficiency onto the buses that gives us 128 buses.
The problem, Mr. Strain, this year is we don't have the opportunity for efficiency. 24 students on a 72 passenger bus is not efficient.
And
Not
Mr.
efficient.
Strain,
And we don't have the option to do that.
absolutely right. Ms. Stamper, to her point, and Mr. Strain, you made the same point as well. At that school you were at this morning, watching buses come in with 10 or fewer students is not what we would look for on any given year. Now, at a magnet school where the bus is traveling from one end of the county to the other, we understand that that may be the case, but our local elementaries, if it's a Sharon Elementary, we don't expect to see a bus come in with 10 students or fewer. So you're absolutely right that is what we're going to work on, but we have to know who those kids are in order to make that happen, to drive the efficiencies that you're wanting, that we want as well. We have to know who those kids are and then make those adjustments accordingly. And that's what we would do even in a traditional year, is wait those first 2 weeks of school. Drivers tell us, hey, this kid's not riding, I can cut this stop. And that's what we do in a traditional year. And as Ms. Stamper points out, unfortunately, this isn't a traditional year. So we're sort of doing the best we can to make this happen in this time period. But this survey is definitely going to help us move in the right direction so we know who we can. If we get good results, and as Ms. Stamper points out, we really are asking the public and parents to really take that seriously. So it will help us, and we will be ready to open and bring kids back January 5th. But please know from my seat, I want kids back as much as anybody else, because this is how my drivers make their livelihood. And this is what we do on a daily basis. But I also know operationally what is in front of me and what happened within the last 2 weeks when drivers took advantage of leave that was offered to them, rightfully so. But this is the situation that we're in today. So now I just have to figure out where I can go to make something happen for January. Is what I see.
Look, I appreciate that. So knowing full well that you do this every year over the first 2 weeks, that's why I'm exploring it now, because we're in the first 2 weeks. We're in our second week right now. And so thus, we know what the ridership is going to look like, right? You're doing the numbers now. And what I'm looking at is how, as you start to compress these runs, how much efficiency is going to be able to be driven out of this to get back the buses that we need, 128 buses, right? And so if we had 128 buses, let's say on November 30th, then what I was just told is we could bring all of the middle schools back on November 30th, not just the K-8s, but all of them back on November 30th, if we were able to compress, and the result is getting 128 buses out of it. And so between now and November 30th, would it be possible to take advantage and drive that compression that you normally do in order to get our kids back in school, which is what we plan to do? Now, obviously the 23rd was Thanksgiving week. It was always an issue. If that's deferred to November 30th, the question is, are you going to be able to turn that around, given the fact that it's standard process? This is what you do every year, Adam. I know you do. And you do a fabulous job of it, right? And the drivers do great, and the transportation department does great. And so using that exact same process, what I'm trying to do is figure out, can we actually bring kids back to school? This is not a health and safety issue. This is a logistical issue, right? And so as far as I know, and maybe the superintendent or somebody on staff could tell me otherwise, I'm not aware of any state or local public health official who has told us that it's not safe to return kids, middle school kids, to school for in-person learning. They haven't said that you have to keep doing remote learning to ensure the health and safety of the kids. And if they haven't said that, clearly this is not a health and safety issue. This is a logistics problem. And
Mr.
this is a
Strain,
logistics
I would-
problem that we work on every year. And what I'm trying to get to is to understand how much efficiency you expect using the same process you do every year.
Carol, Carol, if I could take a first stab, but let me answer the first question that Mr. Strain asked around the can we bring middle school students back on November 30th? And the answer to that question is that's not part of our recommendation. We would not, as it stands right now, we would not have the human capital for drivers. And we just don't have enough time to be able to pivot right now to bring middle school students back on November 30th. It just doesn't buy us enough time given the constraints that we have. So that's why that is not part of the recommendation that we're bringing forward to the board tonight. Ms. Stamper, I'm sorry, you were gonna say something.
No, sir. Thank you for those comments.
So when would you be ready to bring the middle schoolers back then? You're not going to be able to figure these out until we add the high schoolers in as well?
So our recommendation is to bring middle school students back January the 5th. That's our best thinking.
I understand what the recommendation is. So the question is, on November 30th, how many of the elementary school buses are still going to be running at 10 students a bus, instead of collapsing those where you have the buses available to bring middle school students?
I don't, certainly I'll lean on Mr. Johnson, but I don't know that we know that information as we sit or stand here today, exactly, precisely how many.
You're absolutely right, Superintendent Winston. So if we're looking at next week, the week of the 16th, and then we have 2 days before the Thanksgiving holiday, in order to turn that around, Mr. Strain, to do the runs that we have now. So we have these 800 plus buses that are running these elementary kids every day. To figure out who's actually riding and where we could condense would not, in my years of doing this, I can't imagine that being able to do that in that period of time. By next week, we would be surveying and getting the results in. The routing technicians would have to start working that Monday, Tuesday, and then that week of the 30th in order to try to consolidate those elementary runs. But don't forget that the middle school runs in most cases are on a different tier than the elementaries. While we will gain some efficiencies by consolidating or compressing, this bus has 10 elementary kids, this bus has 10 elementary kids, that bus might have 5, and we can consolidate and make one bus with 25. That would free up that bus to possibly go do another elementary school on that same tier, not perhaps that high school or middle school bus that's needing to go at an 8, an 8:30, a 9, or a 9:15. So we'll gain some efficiencies to cover more elementaries, because what we're thinking about is we're bringing more middle school runs back. And how we're, again, as I mentioned way earlier in the presentation, the way that we're able to cover the buses that we're running now, because again, we already are working with 122 drivers that are on leave, plus we have 30 drivers, for example, today that called in sick. So that's 150. So how we're able to do this without a complete disruption of service is move those existing bus drivers around that don't have something to do to other buses to fill in. So while we can start doing that consolidation work and studies and compress things together, we're still going to have a gap. While I don't know what the exact number is to tell you, is it 25, is it 30 buses? It's possible, but what I do know to be true is that that's not going to be possible to do that research, that kind of repairing of the routes, and then be able to let parents know November 30th when they walk out to a bus stop, this will be your bus number, this will be your stop time. I would be derelict in my duties if I told you that was the right thing to do, and that I could give you and the parents good information. That I think that would be just a mess, and I wouldn't want to do that to families and kids.
Superintendent Winston, if I may add a little bit of information as it relates to staffing as well. So what
Please, please, Ms. Rogers.
So as we've talked a little bit about the leaves, we've talked about the FFCRA leaves, we've talked about those who are on regular FMLA or other leaves. Those numbers don't also include those who have been quarantined and or isolated. Those numbers are not included. So there are additional people who are out on leave. And so from a logical perspective, the majority of the FFCRA leaves will expire on December 31st, which makes potentially January a more pliable date in terms of us changing our scope in terms of when we have the students able to come back for the middle schools. But the FFCRA will expire as we know it on 12/31. Again, it could be extended, but right now we know that the majority of this large number of bus drivers would have to come back as of January of 2021.
Okay, Ms. Sawyer, I saw your hand.
I just wanted to comment that while we can talk about putting more elementary students on a bus, collapsing routes, as it were, that creates additional challenges in that we have really long bus rides, and they may end up long enough such that they cannot meet the needs of the middle school or high school schedule, because you have to have the runs have to be of a certain length to be able to wedge in the other grade levels or the other routes. So it's not simply a matter of, say, take two buses that have 12 kids on them and combine them, because the length of that ride may make it so that it can't meet a middle school or high school schedule on the loop back. So I just appreciate all the work that staff is doing to sort this out, and it is not a simple math problem.
So before we go to the motion, do we have any more comments or questions? Okay. Well, I will echo before we go to the motion. I just want to echo that to thank you, Mr. Johnson, and you, Ms. Stamper, and your team for the thankless thousands of hours of work that you've put in really all summer long leading up until this latest challenge. So yeah, and I know this is what you do. Getting kids safely to and from school is what you do. And so I know that this is causing you as much anguish as it's causing us and causing our parents. And I see you wanted to say one more thing, Ms. Stamper.
May I add to what you just said, and just to remind our community that not only has Adam Johnson and his team been working on the logistics and this issue of to and from school, but they have supported serving our meal program, delivering technology to our students, and many other facets of supporting this community since last March. So Adam and team and everyone that is listening in the transportation department, kudos to you. Your dedication and your commitment to these students shows greatly. There is nothing short of being able to support these students in this district that this transportation department has not done. Thank you, sir.
Okay, and I want to make one more thing clear. It's been mentioned a few times, but it's worth mentioning again, is that there will be a survey coming out on the 16th, and we are pleading every parent to take that survey. And if you feel that you can get by without a bus this year, do it. Sign up. I mean, let your school know that you do not need a bus. And I will be one of those parents. My son does not. He's assigned a bus and he is not going to need it. I used to be one of those parents that would keep the bus assigned to us just in case, but then drive him in the morning so that he could sleep in a little bit later, but make sure he took the bus just often enough to keep the stop and not get the stop dropped. Let's not do that this year. I won't be doing that this year. That's one of those commitments and sacrifices that we're asking families to make in this extraordinary pandemic. But at the same time, if you need a bus, that is your right, and that is our obligation and our duty to provide you a bus. And the other thing is the full remote academy. I want to be very clear about that. That is not going to be a survey. That is a matter of telling your school, if you want to sign up for the full remote academy for second semester, tell your school, contact your principal, call the front office, tell your school, and you can do that tomorrow. You don't have to wait. And so if you have any sense of caution that we might be sending kids back to school before you and your family are ready to go back to school in person, please go ahead and sign up for the full remote academy. And you do that by simply calling your school. And with that, I'm going to turn to Ms. De La Hara to make a motion. You're muted.
Thank you. Thank you. And I'll ask everyone to bear with me. It is a bit long as I read the motion before us this evening. Madam Chair, in order to ensure the health and safety of students, I move to approve the revisions to the previously approved CMS transportation plan for in-person and remote instruction, Plan B, for grades 6 through 8 as recommended by the superintendent. Additionally, I move to adopt the 2 new school calendars attached to this motion entitled Middle School Calendar for the 2020-2021 and K-8 School Calendar for 2020-2021. My motion includes the following. Students in grades 6 through 8 assigned to a middle school will begin in-person instruction on January 5th, 2021. These students will remain in remote learning until that date. Students in grades 6 through 8 assigned to a K-8 school will begin in-person instruction on November 30th, 2020 under the following provisions. Students in grades 6 through 8 assigned to a K-8 school will be divided into 2 groups instead of the previously approved 3 groups. The first grouping of students in grades 6 through 8 assigned to a K-8 school, Group A, will attend in-person instruction every Monday and Tuesday that are instructional days per the K-8 middle school calendar beginning on November 30th, 2020. The second grouping of students in grades 6 through 8 assigned to a K-8 school, Group B, will attend in-person instruction every Thursday and Friday that are instructional days per the K-8 middle school calendar beginning on December 3rd, 2020. Every Wednesday that is an instructional day will be remote learning for all students in a K-8 school. The previously approved in-person instruction plans for pre-K, exceptional children, kindergarten through grade 5, and grades 9 through 12 remain unchanged. This plan will adhere to the guidelines of the remote learning plan previously approved by this board on July 15th, 2020. That concludes it.
All right.
I second that motion.
We have a motion on the floor from Ms. De La Hara, a second from Ms. Byers-Bailey. Ms. De La Hara, would you like to speak to your motion?
Sure. I'll say a few words just to kind of wrap us up. I'm sure others will have some final comments. I do think it's important to reiterate that, you know, our abilities to open to in-person instructions have always been based on several factors, which of course make up our community, our return to school metrics that we post every Monday, including our community health metrics, labor, staffing, our ability to do that effectively, and operational building readiness. And we look at that every week. And so, you know, as different things come our way, I know everyone's sick of hearing this word, but we pivot to that and we respond to that. And that's where I kind of see where we are this evening and why I'm supporting the plan. It was not, you know, what I personally wanted, but it is what is before us. And I don't see a way for us not to move forward with the recommended plan from the superintendent. You know, I do, as I said earlier, want us to respond to that survey that we've mentioned, looking at what we can do with variations of the bus schedules, because I don't want us to end up in the same situation come January, and to the ability that we can try to think through different scenarios that may be coming our way, so that we can be prepared and be that much more, on top of our game. So we're not, faced with a similar situation, because we don't know if leave will be, extended and things like that. So I trust the good work of our transportation staff to look at all scenarios. I'm grateful that we are translating this news about the survey and the changes of the plans. I think Dr. Hayes mentioned that they were going to be working on getting that information out and translating it to many languages. And of course, I hope we're using all of our community partners, particularly in our international communities, to get those words out, to get the notices out. I do know there was some discussion this week of, that this may not seem fair. This idea that we are, the children that are in 6-8 that are in the K-8s are returning and the other children aren't. And I do know that many of us really looked at that to make sure, from my perspective, that it was not really an equity issue. And what I mean by that is, we have K-8 schools that are spread out throughout the county that represent many different, populations. Some are magnet, some are traditional schools, some are low wealth schools, some are higher wealth schools. It's just, it seemed to be, spread out. And so for me, I guess I just wanted to say that, yes, it doesn't seem necessarily fair, but there are a lot of things right now that just aren't, fair that we're dealing with. And I feel comfortable with doing as much as we can to bring back the children, for whatever reason, the luck of the draw, that they're able to come back under this plan. And so I'm happy for those families that have that opportunity to do that. I know, I guess one final quick word, I know there are many families that are disappointed, right now, that wanted their kids to go back, including, my own family and my own daughter, who, I explained to her last night that this was probably going to happen. And I guess I just want to comment that it was really interesting to see her response to that, because while of course she was hoping to go back to in-person learning in a few weeks, she also handled it with, a lot of grace. And I guess I would just ask that of our general public, because she impressed me with her ability to understand that it's a pandemic and there are things that are, beyond our control. And she understood that we're having to make decisions based on, how the virus is affecting us. And we'll continue to do that and try to get them back as soon as we can. So I look forward to approving this vote tonight. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Does anybody else want to chime in before we go to the vote? I see your hand, Ms. Shipp.
Yes, I guess I'm kind of, I was torn. This is one I've really been torn on. And I think Ms. Delahara kind of echoed what, and I was thinking in terms of this sense of, I don't know, equality, equal access, really wanting all of our, 6-8 students to be back in school. I've talked to families on all ends, from all backgrounds, all demographics, and there were just so many looking forward to it. I have some great nieces and nephews that were in middle school, will not be going back because they don't fit the K-8 6-8 model. And then there's schools that I felt like that were really schools that needed. We had kids, and we still do, that won't be able to return, that may really need to be back, such as we do have several, as Ms. Byers-Bailey mentioned, that will, and that's good, but there's so many other schools still that their kids with needs that I would have liked to have seen them go back. So this for me is a tough one, but I do appreciate the opportunity. I know the 6-8 schools that are in the K-8 situation, and they are spread it out, limited numbers in some parts of the county, very limited, even on my end of the county. But I do want to see the opportunity, because that sense of fairness or equal access is not possible right now. And I see that, but this is definitely heartfelt for me because I really, really know that academically, many of our children and families wanted these kids back in person for the learning, and it's not going to happen. But I do believe it's better to have the ones that we can put back, be back in school, and it will help those.
I see Ms. Cheek and then Ms. Byers-Bailey.
Yes, so as I said earlier, I will not be supporting this recommendation. I'm very disappointed. I do hear some things that make some, what am I going to say? To me, this isn't a health and safety issue. It's an operation failure, and we are letting down our kids. I think it's okay for kids to be upset about this. Grace means that they have that opportunity to go through whatever emotions they have. And I think that if there are kids and families that are upset with this, they should have that, that's okay. And if there are kids out there that are middle schoolers that are real upset, and I'm getting some emails as we are in the meeting right now, I would be happy to talk to your middle schooler. I've been there 3 times, survived it 3 times. And I'd be happy to talk to your middle schooler and just let them fuss at me a little bit about it. So moms and dads, if you're out there and you have a middle school student that needs somebody to offload a little bit of their disappointment, I'm here. And if you need to find me, all you have to do is look on the school board page. My phone number's on there, and I'm on social media. And I'm happy to let your kids offload some of their grief over this decision that we're about to make that I will not be supporting. Thank you.
Ms. Byers-Bailey.
I just want to say that I'm grateful that we have found a way to do what we can for as many students as we can, as soon as we can. And no, we weren't able to do it for everybody, but for those who we could do it for, we did step up and do it. We didn't just say, well, because we can't do it for one, we're not going to do it for any. I am grateful that we are doing this. And I'm going to join you, Elise, and my youngster is not going to be riding the bus this when the high schoolers go back either.
Mr. Strain.
Ms. Byers-Bailey, I too am grateful that we were able to do what we said we were going to do for the 6th to 8th graders in our K-8s. I'm devastated that we're not going to be able to meet the needs of our 6th to 8th graders that should be and deserve to be going back to school. We've discussed this long enough. At the end of the day, this is not a health and safety issue. There is nothing that is preventing our kids from in-person learning. There hasn't been any medical professional, there hasn't been any public health official that has said it. The state law says that we cannot extend the remote learning unless it is required for the health and safety of our students. And so, no, I can't support it. It's not the right thing for our middle school students. And frankly, it's debatable whether it's even compliant with the state law. So yeah, I won't be supporting this. We've got to get this fixed, even if as this goes through tonight, the next time we're going to have this conversation is the next time we put more kids on the buses. We've got to figure it out.
All right. Anyone else? Oh, Ms. Marshall.
This is the proverbial rock in a hard place. Our transportation staff, have gotten a number of emails in terms of institutional failure and that sort of thing. I want to say that I think that they've been working very hard in all kinds of ways to pivot to do all sorts of things, whether that's delivering food, technology, all the things that we've asked. And as a board, we've worked hard since March to keep our hourly workers paid. So we have worked with the state, we have worked legislatively to get leaves to be able to keep our folks employed. And this is hard here that we're coming up at the last hour. But again, I understand folks have family issues and things that they have to deal with. And so again, to everyone, always remember, and I know we're getting so tired of this and we're going to have to say it some more. We've never been here. This has never happened. Pray so hard we never have to go through this again, but here we are. I feel like this is a situation where we have a lot of resource in this community, right, even now in the short term, to solve some problems. So I know that there's certain areas of town, and my district's one of them, where we have a number of people that are doing car ridership and would be happy to exit that bus. And I'm expecting my district to step up. I think we have some things to give, and this will help us all. And I know that that I'm going to get a lot of positive response from that. I also know that we have folks coming back in a rotation that is, when you think about it, you've divided this up into 3 distinct groups, and we have about 40% that have gone into a full remote academy, and they are not there. So even demands on our buses right now are pretty minimal. But I understand where we are. I will not be supporting this because I do think we can solve some things in the short term, but I understand that it's a Herculean effort. And so I want to tell the public that these folks have been working really hard to do this the whole time. I know they're going to keep working hard. I anticipate that we will have great community response to helping us out now, if this passes, and then in January. And again, we don't know what the future holds, and we just have to plan for things that we did not see coming. And whether we should have or not, you know, you all, there's going to be a lot of Monday morning quarterbacking on that. But frankly, folks, in the last 2 weeks, this has happened. And so we have to respond. But I think our community was ready to respond. I know people of all stripes take kids to school. Many people are at home working. I know that there are a lot of folks that are essential workers that have a harder time. So I want to make sure we can get those buses to them. I think we can do a little bit better and squeeze a little bit more juice out of this in this semester. And that's why I would like to continue on with the plan that we have. But I do want to thank our staff and our bus drivers for everything they do for us, because it's a team and we have to have everybody. Thank you.
All right, before we call the vote, I'm going to go back to Ms. De La Hara. I understand you need to make a slight correction to the motion.
Yes, our wonderful Madam General Counsel pointed out that instead in the beginning where I read CMS Transportation Plan, and I should have read CMS Transition Plan. I'm hoping that is sufficient to make that statement. Madam, do I need to reread the whole thing? Okay, I just want to be clear on that. Thank you for pointing that out to me.
Okay, thank you for clearing that up. Madam Clerk, can you please call the vote?
Board Member Rhonda Cheek, how say you?
I vote no.
Board Member Dr. Ruby Jones. If you would take you're on mute, Dr. Jones. Thank you.
I vote yes.
Board Member Carol Sawyer, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Margaret Marshall, how say you?
No.
Board Member Sean Strain, how say you?
No.
Board Member Lenora Shipp, how say you?
Yes.
Board Member Jennifer De La Hara, how say you?
Yes.
Board Vice Chair Thelma Byers Bailey, how say you?
Yes.
Board Chair Elise Dashew, how say you?
Yes.
Madam Chair, the motion passes by a vote of 6-3.
Okay, thank you. All right, I am now going to turn to Superintendent for your report.
Thank you, Madam Chair and board members. And I do too want to acknowledge before Mr. Johnson hops off of this call, I do want to acknowledge the incredible hard work of our transportation team, our drivers. You know, in the face of these challenging times, I do want to acknowledge, I mean, we rely so heavily on our drivers in particular to transport our students to and from school safely. And we could not deliver on the instruction in the classroom if we cannot get students to school safely. So I want to acknowledge the hard work of your team. So now you're more than welcome to hop off the call if you want to. Not forcing you to, but I just wanted to acknowledge that for a moment. I do, Madam Chair, board members, I have a brief report tonight with several important communications for our CMS families. And I will say that more information about the items that I will share will be forthcoming this week from our district communications team and from our individual schools. First, I'd like to share that the district, as the team, as staff has stated previously, but I think it's worth a reminder, the district has moved up the deadline for families to determine whether their students will participate in the full remote academy for the second semester or attend school in person. The second semester begins January 5th for students after our break in our Thanksgiving break in our winter holidays. Families who are content with their students' current enrollment, whether that be in person or in the full remote academy, do not need to make a change. Families who would like to either change from in person to the full remote academy or from the full remote academy to in person for the second semester must notify their school by November 30th of this year. Also, families with students currently in the full remote academy who indicate that their students will attend in person for the second semester will need also to indicate whether their students need CMS provided transportation for the second semester. And for all the students who are currently enrolled for in-person instruction and anyone who changed from full remote to in-person for the second semester, we must know whether your students need CMS transportation via our yellow buses no later than November 30th. Having this information for both enrollment and transportation will help us plan for the return to school after winter break. I also want to remind our families with children in grades K through 5 that our enrollment remains open in our after-school enrichment programs and our before-school enrichment programs. This will continue over the next few weeks until these programs are full. So I would strongly encourage our families to act soon if you would like your students to participate. Now, this also applies for students in grades 6 through 8 who attend K-8 schools that have the ACEP and or BCEP programs, as those programs will begin as soon as November 30th. So also, our new student enrollment, I'm excited to say, is open. We will have more communication planned around enrolling students for the 2021-2022 school year and about the options that are available to families with CMS. The first round school choice lottery opens November 30th and it ends December 13th. Again, more information about that is on our website, or you can find out more information about by contacting your student's school. Finally, I would like to mention that this is National Family Engagement Month. In celebration of National Family Engagement Month, the CMS Title I Family and Community Outreach and Community Partnerships and Family Engagement Departments will be highlighting the many opportunities that are available to our staff, family, students, and community members to engage in activities that support learning experience and enhance the social emotional well-being and growth. We are extremely pleased to have leaders and staff engaged in bringing families and schools together to help facilitate better learning and development in our community. With that, Madam Chair, that concludes my report.
All right, thank you. I will now recognize any board member who would like to make a report. Dr. Jones?
Yes, I realize that it's late, but I have been putting this statement off for months now. And it's regarding equity. When we look at equity, our public has little insight into the major activity and intense work that goes on in the operational side, the service department divisions of CMS. This service operations divisions work 12 months a year. And as we've noted tonight, they really keep CMS humming. However, at the level that provides this essential support to maintain and to keep schools running, we have an equity problem. This problem is a miasma that causes great workers, experienced workers, mental anguish, and some to actually leave CMS with bitterness, and some to retire early. Because as one early retiree described her experience, it was a toxic work environment. This problem must be addressed. It is especially egregious with Black employees when less proficient, less experienced individuals, most often white, are literally awarded positions based on cronyism and favoritism. I am sickened when I continue to hear multiple reports from support department employees of this festering sore of inequity. Black employees who have been callously overlooked, but with nowhere to turn and no voice to speak up because they feel the high probability of repercussions. Sadly, Black employees treated inequitably have felt the necessity to even have their white colleague to call me to attest to this malfeasance. One former white employee spoke to me stating, quote, "Dr. Jones, the work environment was so toxic, I retired early, although I loved my job," end of quote. She went on to detail how a white person who knew nothing about the particular service department was brought in to supervise experienced employees who had many years of tenure. To add insult, a highly qualified employee was not even considered. One with 16 years in the department and highly respected, not considered for a promotion. However, this Black employee was expected to teach this novice neophyte the job. Now this Black worker, I discovered, had 2 degrees in the related field and 16 years experience. How is this? What do you call this? Indeed, as was expressed to me, is toxic. Unfortunately, this is not an isolated occurrence. It is not good for CMS. Other departments, payroll, we found in the past, have had similar problems. Toxic, a description I've repeatedly heard over the years I've been on the board, employees wanting secret meetings out of fear, telling of inequities, many times racial inequity in their work environment. It is a problem. Yet I've been told, quote, at will designation means you can do just this to employees without cause and have these employees can be and have been dismissed. It is a festering sore, to quote Langston Hughes. Therefore, I am requesting a thorough investigation, audit of every support department to uncover and to correct this pernicious equity problem. This problem is not unique to CMS. Jefferson County School District in Kentucky has created an equity monitoring tool. Some districts I have spoken to have instituted personal/confidential interviews. To that end, I am asking that this kind of look or report be made to us as board members. This is an emergency task. If we are to be transformative to eradicate this serious problem. And with that, I will end my request by saying 2 bullets. Presently, I'm aware there's no process in place for advancement, no guidelines or regulations or policy on how support personnel may appeal unfair practices. No platform on how we get, quote, real critique of work environments. Therefore, Madam Chairman, in order to deal with this invidious and insidious concern, I would ask that we take some kind of serious look in departments and try to manage morale and a sense of fairness and a sense of equity. Thank you.
Thank you. Anybody else have a report tonight? Ms. Byers-Bailey and then Ms. Shipp.
Thank you. I would second Dr. Jones' motion or request or statement. I have personally heard similar reports recently, just this past couple of weeks, where an employee had a situation just like that. But that's not what I wanted to report on tonight. I had the opportunity this afternoon to spend some time with the director of Outteach. We used to call it school gardens, but now they're called outdoor learning spaces. And they have grown. Their reach has gone nationwide of the department. Just the one department here in North Carolina, in Charlotte, has reached and become a nationwide institution. But that is phenomenal in terms, especially in this COVID time, for our children to be able to get out, learn science and technology and STEM applications that they can practice outdoors with plants and animals and dirt. There's just so much that they can learn, and it's so joyful for them to have that experience and that intellectual stimulation. But specifically, as Outteach goes to various schools for various events, they're going to be at Walter G. Byers K-8 school on Friday, November 20th for an exhibit. And I would encourage those of you who would like to see what is going on. Byers has had a community, outdoor learning space for several years. And there are going to be some activity around that space on the 20th. And I would invite you all to come join me and see the very latest in what's going on outdoors for our children to learn. Thank you.
Ms. Ship.
Yes. One thing I'll just add to what Dr. Jones said. Would that be something I knew Chief of Compliance Officer could maybe look into and might be a good project?
Just to keep us on track, we're right now in our reports from board members. It's
Okay,
not
and
really
that's all I'm
dialogue
doing.
Q&A. So we can take that offline and
Okay,
and
take that offline.
take that to next step.
That's not really what I wanted to say anyway. I wanted to just say thank you to all the staff, the principals, the teachers, and the support staff for all they have done to ensure a smooth as possible opening for our K-5 students. I had the opportunity to be in schools and just see the children coming back, and the staff just worked so hard to really make this work and to make it's like the first day of school for many of them when they started for the scholars. And I was very appreciative of the hard work and to see the nursing support that actually was going on in the schools. And then the carryover of other schools and other departments coming over to help the elementary schools, coming from the high schools, coming from the middle schools to provide support where there were staffing needs. And I just thought that was great to see that happen within actually here in the learning community. So that was really great. And I want to say thank you for that and the hard work of all the staff that made it happen just in these 2 weeks, going into the second week for our K-5 scholars. And so kudos to everybody who made it happen and the good work. Thank you.
All right, anybody else? Okay, I just have a quick report. I want to thank the schools and the principals who I had the privilege of visiting and helping out at last week. So that is Principal Walker Cooper at Piney Grove. Thank you to you and your staff. Principal Davis at J.H. Gunn, thank you. Principal Bonacera at Winding Springs, thank you to everyone at your school. And Principal Simpson at Blythe Elementary, thank you to you and your staff at your school for the warm welcome and for the warm welcome to your K-5 students. It was just an atmosphere of joy and relief to see the kids in the classroom and to see that life in the schoolhouse. Just felt really, really good. And so I know that there is a huge amount of work going behind the scenes and happening every day to make that work, to make that happen safely, to help the parents get up to speed on all the processes and the attestation forms and the symptom screeners. And it's just heroic work, and I want to thank you for it. But the bottom line is it was just so good to see the kids in the schoolhouse. And I can't wait until we can safely get all of our kids back into the schoolhouse. And so with that, I'm going to entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second.
Right, motion from Ms. Byers-Bailey, second from Ms. Ship. All in favor, let it be known by a show of hands and say yes. Yes.
Yes.
Any opposed? Thank you, everybody. We're adjourned.
Yes.
Have a good night.
Good night.
Good night.
Good night.
I know she-
Happy Veterans Day tomorrow.
Thank
Yeah.
you. Happy Veterans Day. Yes.